Good afternoon, everybody, and welcome to another deep probing, in-depth analysis of all my games from a tournament. This time, it's from AltiBash 4, which took place yesterday, run by the Altrincham Gaming Club. And this first image that greets you here will let you know that I didn't take either of my usual armies, which are, of course, the goblins and the undead. This time I decided I'd go for some alternative ogres, shall we say. So it's always a risk going into any kind of Kings of War event with an army made up of the much despised in the Kings of War community Stormcast Eternals representing ogres. But thankfully I did escape with my life. I wasn't just beaten to a pulp, and no one ambushed me outside the building and stabbed me repeatedly or anything like that. I made it home in one piece, so I think it went over quite well. People did compliment me on the army, particularly the giant and the dragon seemed to catch people's eye. I think they look pretty tasty. And no one seemed too offended that the models that represent the end of what was to a lot of people a very fond game from their past. Those models didn't generate too negative a reception from anyone, so I'm pleased about that. It's an ogre army though, and I've only played with ogres once prior to this tournament, so there's another risk. The fact that taking not only a list that I've never played before, but also an army that I've only had a tiny amount of experience with to a tournament, maybe not the most competitive idea, but I was mainly going for what looked cool at this particular tournament. Because I had some fairly competitive undead and goblin lists written up, and then about a week before the tournament, I thought, you know what? Instead of that, let's just go for the coolest looking army I can possibly field. So that was my thought process with the ogres and BASILEAN allies, it should be pointed out as well, because the one game that I'd played of ogres previous to this, there was a distinct lack of mobility and maneuverability. So you'll see what I've allied in a moment. So I'll go through the various tournament rules, first of all, that were specific to this event. So it's 4 games. The first 2 games were 1,800 points, and the last 2 games were 2,200 points. And most of your army had to remain the same. You were allowed to take out a small amount from the 1,800 list. I think it was up to 200 points. So I decided, because I didn't have many models to choose from, I would not take anything out of the smaller list and just add things in. And because ogres have a lot of units that are over 200 points, it's quite difficult to actually do that. But with the allies and with combinations of magical artifacts, I was able to get 2 lists that were exactly on the nose for the point level without having to take anything out. So the other rules in effect, there were re-rolls at this tournament, which is quite a common thing now. You'll pay a small fee for charity and then you'll get re-rolls. Now usually it's just 1 re-roll per game, but in this tournament they decided to put a different spin on it. You had 2 re-rolls, 1 for your own dice rolls and 1 for your opponent's dice rolls, but they have to last you the entire event. Not once per game, once per day. So if you blow through both of them in the first game, you'll have nothing to re-roll with later on, which I thought was very, very interesting and made you think much more carefully about using them. Because if it's once per game, you don't really think twice about throwing it away on a bad roll or a good roll for your opponent in this instance. But when it's once per day, you think, do I really want to use that in game 1 when at the end of the day, it could be the difference between going home, jumping around with joy after a victory, or suffering a crushing defeat and dropping down 6 places in the table? And it adds a totally different element to the rerolls, I think, and it's interesting. There was also a unique spin on one of the scenarios, which is coming up as well. There was a bit of a narrative twist to the whole event, which I'm sure everyone paid a huge amount of attention to, involving collecting a magical artifact, finding out where it is, interrogating some ogres, and then getting out of there with the artifact. How much attention people paid to that, I couldn't possibly comment. But game 1, you can see here that I was up against Ratkin. So I'll go through my list as you can see it on the table here. I think you can see my cursor on the screen. So let's have a look here what we've got in the comments. There's a few people in there already. The Bigfoot is a big fan of cups of tea, apparently. Peter Higgins says, rule of cool is always good. Yes, it is. Let's see. Peter Higgins says, were they tracked between rounds to stop shenanigans? I wasn't aware of anyone going around checking that the rerolls had or hadn't been used yet, but I would assume people would get caught out at some point because there would be some kind of dialogue going around regarding any amusing stories of the rerolls being used. And if two people were reporting that the same person used the same reroll, then I'm sure there would have been hell to pay. There would have been decapitations in the tournament hall. Fluffy Dread is alive in the chat as well. And if you're not watching this live, don't feel too left out. These aren't particularly intended to be seen live. It's just much more convenient to do it this way, so I don't have to go through a big pile of editing at the end of it. So my list, these are the 1800 points games, first of all. So you can see that I've got 2 units there, right next to each other. Those are Ogre Siege Breakers, which are very, very tough and resilient. And they dish out a ton of pain as well. They're only slow, they're only speed 5, but they have defense 6 at the front. So my thinking was, in every game, unless I see a situation that specifically suggests I shouldn't do that, I'll put them side to side and move them up kind of equal to each other, so that at all times they're having one of their flanks protected, and then I'll use other units possibly to protect their other flanks as well. Also, being shot in the flank is a risk. And as I was against a bit of a Skaven gun line here. Or not Skaven. Well, I suppose all the models are Skaven, but it's the Ratkin, as they're known in Kings of War. So as far as down here, we've got shooters. I'll tell you about the artifacts, actually, because the 2 Siegebreak units do have artifacts on them. One of them has Dwarven Ale, and the other one has Blessing of the Gods. So one of them is going to be slightly more hitty, one of them slightly more survivable. I've got some shooters there. And I think you can tell the difference between most of these models. You can see they've got bows, can't you? So they had Blood of the Old King, which gives you Elite and Vicious for 1 turn of the game, which I thought, Ogre shooters, they're quite easy to maneuver away from because they can't turn and shoot. And sometimes you're only going to get 1 decent round of shooting in. So I thought I'll give them a slightly cheaper item. It's only 15 points that allows them to be extra devastating for 1 furious salvo of shooting. So even if they never get to shoot again, at least they've got that 1 really powerful shot off. It's also, you could also argue that you'd put a more kind of permanent item on the ogre shooters because they're also pretty good in combat as well, being ogres. So really, even if someone gets right up to you, you're still going to be able to make use of it later on. Then I've got down here my 2 hero characters. I've got Grogagamok, who obviously doesn't have any items on him because he's a named character. He's 260 points on his own, so he's a bit of a beast. The main thing with him is that his close combat attacks have the rule called the Amputator, so they have Blast D3. So if you end up hitting with all 7 attacks and then roll well, you could potentially hit with 21 hits. And he is just very, very nasty indeed. He can just dish out massed damage in such a small little footprint as well. Then we've got an army standard bearer, and I've given that the banner of the Griffin because the ogre nerve all across the board isn't that high. Most of the units in this army are 15, 17 in nerve. So it's not obscenely high. So I thought giving them the banner of the Griffin, which will boost the nerve of nearby units, might be handy. Then down here we've got a giant. Now you can probably see that it's enormous. A normal giant would not be anything like that size on most gaming tables, and a giant would normally be taking up a base the quarter of the size of this one as well. But this is where Rule of Cool comes in. I don't think there's any real benefit to having a giant on such an obscenely large base, but because this model is already based and it's so large, it was on a round base, so I stuck it down to a square base just to square it off there, just so it's suitable for Kings of War. 100mm square base. Giants are normally supposed to be 50mm, so you could fit 4 regular giants into the space this one takes up. So the downsides to that will be it's going to be much easier to flank him when he charges into the enemy lines because his base will stick out backwards much further, and also you can fit more units into any particular facing when you're attacking him. There are a couple of plus points to having a much larger base, meaning you've got a wider field of view when you want to be charging off. And also, I suppose it lets you move a little bit further as well in any particular direction. Because obviously if you turn, the front of your base would be there. And if you turn that way, your front would be there. So it gives you a bit more of a distance you can cover, potentially, if you haven't decided which way you're going to go yet. But for the most part, it's negatives, having an extra large base. Speaking of extra large bases, we've got a Chariot Horde over here, represented by this Star Drake. And I think the Chariot Horde is actually the biggest base you can have in Kings of War. It hits pretty hard because it's got Thunderous Charge 2, Crushing Strength 1, and it has 24 attacks and hits on 3s. So it can dish out serious damage, but I'm not sure whether it dishes out enough serious damage to warrant it taking up this much space. I've put the Potion of the Caterpillar on it, so it's not going to be hindered when it charges, when it's going through difficult terrain or woods and so on. But of course, obstacles are still going to affect it. And there are quite a few obstacles on this table, which is annoying. Also, so when I was saying about the giant, when you charge into enemy lines, you're going to get flanked. With this thing, it's almost a guarantee you're going to get flanked by multiple units. A Chariot Horde, when that goes into enemy lines, you're never going to be able to overrun far enough to get past. If they're in a straight line like that, and you charge into the front unit, there's no way with D6 you'll be able to get out of the range of being flanked by whatever was on either side. So you really have to cover it to prevent it being flank charged. You have to use it in combination with other units, and you don't have to worry too much about its survival. It's kind of a glass cannon, people have described it as, and I would say that's fair, but it's not that much of a cannon. I said it was more like a glass shotgun because it does decent damage, but I don't think it's really enough. But it's there just, again, for the rule of cool. Then right in front of that, we've got a regiment of Elohi, which are my BASILEAN allies, which fly, and they're self-inspiring as well. So they're the perfect allies. You don't need to take any characters with them to keep them inspired. They can just fly off on their own, be inspired. They can't become wavered either. And they have Iron Resolve, which in some ways makes them immune to really, really weak, small, annoying shooting attacks. You think about things like wizards with Lightning Bolt 3 may get 1 wound through, but then they can't possibly do anything with that 1 wound because they've got nerf 14. So that wound is going to immediately be removed by the Iron Resolve. So very, very handy. And we've got one of those in the list. I'll tell you what comes into the bigger list when we get to those games. But in terms of game 1, against the Ratkin and this scenario, I've got the sheets from the scenarios here. This is Occupy, which means that each side places a primary objective in the opponent's half, which they're trying to get to. And if you sit on that at the end of the game, you get 2 victory points. And then there are 3 other points, the secondary objectives near the middle of the table, and they are worth 1 each if you claim them at the end of the game. You don't get any points for sitting on your own objective on your side. So really, it wants you to advance forward and get into the opponent's half, mostly, but it's not compulsory. Of course, if you kill everything, the scenario usually doesn't matter anyway. Usually, might I add. So, let's see. Now, before the tournament, I was under the impression this was going to be kind of a ratish gun line I was up against. So, you can see, we've got some pretty standard Ratkin stuff. I think these are just standard warriors. Don't think there were any slaves, which are defense 2, so I'm glad I didn't meet any of those because I've got tons of crushing strength and that would just be wasted on such a pitiful unit. Then over here we've got a couple of these big wheels. I can't remember what they're called in the Ratkin list, but they were the projectile based ones, and there's a couple of casters around here as well. Then over on this side we've got some of the elite troops there. We've got some more average troops. I think these guys had the Hammer of Measured Force, so I didn't want to send anything with high defense into them. Then we've got some more just feeble little warriors, I think, and then we've got some breath attacks down here. Now, there's a lot of projectiles in this army, and I was slightly concerned about that because I think most of them had some decent piercing on them as well, and my army is susceptible. It's got most of its defense 5 across the whole army, apart from the siege breakers, which are defense 4. So any shooting that's piercing like 2 or 3 worries me greatly because my units don't have nerve that's that high. So that's the kind of thing that can really, really get through that armor of my army. And I'd rather be in the fight before I start taking damage. I don't want to get gunned down before I get there because I'm mostly combat based. I've only got that 1 shooter unit. So you can see my deployment here. Put these guys right in front of the chariot. That wasn't particularly planned out. It was just the way my opponent was deploying, and then I reacted to it. I think I may have put these guys in front first and then put the chariots over there to counter what was on that side of the table. But overall, I couldn't counter my opponent because, I mean, look how many drops he's got compared to mine. I've only got 8. And he's got, let's see, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, about 13 drops. So he was able to deploy most of his army after I'd already finished. Then my deployment here, I've got my shooters behind this obstacle, so I'll be able to shoot over it, and if he wants to shoot me, I'll be in cover. The giant is hanging out near all the various difficult terrain and obstacles because, of course, he can charge through it unhindered, but he doesn't want to start off standing in it because his strider rule doesn't mean that he can move out the double through difficult terrain. It just means that he never suffers hindered charges. So if he wants to move out the double, which he probably will, I don't want to start him off right behind that terrain against a gun line like that. You can see my two characters here. You can see I've kind of had to react to my opponent here. Obviously, when I was putting down characters, there was space left for siege breakers or other units in front of them, depending where my opponent put his units. And in the end, I decided to put these guys over here behind the hill. And this is where most of the meaty shooting attacks coming from, round about this area. So I'm making sure these guys are front on to that threat. And also these guys are slightly further back, just so in turn one, if my opponent gets it, they can't just move forward a few inches and then start gunning down my heroes. And the shooters as well being in the middle, so they've got a choice of the entire battlefield, and they're not going to be without targets for the majority of the game, which is something that can happen, especially with a unit that has to turn and then can't shoot. So you can see one of the objectives is there. And my primary objective is right on this side of the table underneath some of his little chaff units here. I can't actually see where it is because someone's sitting right on top of it, but rest assured that's where it is. There's another one right there. That's one of the regular objectives. And there's the other two there. Ignore the numbers that are written on them because these are all worth the same. So, turn one. Who gets it? It's the Ratkin. Now, I think I may have won the roll-off and made him go first because he didn't have any shooting above 24 inches. So he was going to be wasting some of his shooting attacks by going first, and also he'd be moving towards me, which is what I want. And you can see, oh look, we see a human hand with multicolored dice there. So I don't suppose we can analyze the hand or the complexion or the cleanliness of the hand because it's a bit of a blurry shot. I think there's some clearer shots of people's hands later on for people that are into that kind of thing. So you can see deforestation going on there as he moves his stuff into the woods. Most of the terrain at this tournament was very good for that, actually. You were able to take the pieces off the bases so you could get your units in there without too much trouble. For the most part, there were one or two notable exceptions, which I'll get to. So now I'm not particularly showing the paint quality on these units here. I'm just showing that these shooting attacks here put 2 damage onto the Elohi, which isn't an issue because they're going to iron resolve one of those back and they're not too worried about. Like I said, they're not worried about just cheap little shooting attacks like that for the most part. However, look at this. The shooters took 2 damage in turn 1 and they immediately became wavered on a 6/6. And I was staring at that once per tournament token that said, make your opponent re-roll 2 dice. And I thought, should I use it at the very start of game 1 in the first turn, right at the start of the day? And I thought, well, you never know. It might not actually be critical to the game. Let's just see how it pans out. Because even with his shooting sets, it's unlikely, with them being in cover, if he gets 2 damage on them again next turn, they're still not that scared. He probably won't roll that high and waver them again. So going without shooting for 1 turn, I can live with it. I don't need to make him re-roll. So I did not force my opponent to use another dice roll there with my token. And as I'm moving up here, you can see the Chariot is just staring down his units. And for the most part, I'm not going to be able to plow through this. There just aren't enough turns in the game because he can chaff me up with all this stuff here. So the Elohi don't want to get involved in that kind of mess because there's so many breath attacks over there. Even if I land behind, they're still going to get flamed equally. So I'm just deciding to stare down his flank instead. And he's actually got this unit, this elite infantry unit here. And they are going to present their flank in a minute, which is going to provide an interesting dilemma / opportunity. You can see no one is actually looking into the woods here because they don't want to be charged by my units on the other side of the woods. He doesn't want that unit being charged by the Chariots. If I'm going to charge anyone, he wants it to be these just terrible, feeble units here. And a lot of his stuff backs away a bit at some point. I don't think that's actually happened yet, though, because I think we're still on turn 1 here. So they're wavered, so they can't shoot, so everything just moves up, basically. Obviously, I don't move into charge range of any of his units because I've got the speed edge on many of them, particularly with my Chariot and the Flyers and the Giant. But over on this side, the Siege Breakers do not have a speed edge, so he's going to dictate when the charging takes place here, so I just go forward quite rapidly. Now, at this point, I believe this unit here, these Siege Breakers, have actually opened up their flank to some shooting attacks from over there. But I'm not sure whether that was a mistake from me or whether I thought he would target something else, because Grogagamok's right there. The Shooter Horde won't be wavered anymore after next turn, so maybe I just thought he wouldn't shoot at them. Turn 2. So you can see he's pushed some units into the woods. I think this unit is in the woods now. They are in the woods. I think these ones have stayed out of charge range of the Chariots, though. And let's see, I think he maneuvers something else as well. That might be next. So you can see everything else. They're just backing away from my Siege Breakers to delay them getting into combat, pretty much. So he's going to have more time to shoot, which is probably wise on his part. There's no point just marching towards your doom from my 2 really hard-hitting units. And you've got a bit of a close-up of these shooters here, or these shooty units. That presumably means that they killed something or they damaged something. Let's see. Yes, they wavered the Chariot Horde, doing 9 damage to it. Wow, wow, wow. Now, there was some incredible rolling going on there for him to do that much damage to the Chariot Horde. On average, I don't think he should have been getting that much. But, of course, these things happen, and it's become wavered, which is... It's not a huge disaster. It does mean the Chariot Horde is probably going to get killed before it does anything. But my main focus is over on... We'll get to the other side in a second. Is on this side here, the 2 units of Siege Breakers. They're marching triumphantly across the table, and there's quite a lot of objectives in the middle. So I'm hoping if I can just kill what's in the middle and not worry too much about all the chaff over on that side, because it's going to struggle to get back into the middle to affect the game anyway, then maybe I can still prevail here. And look at that. So these big wheels of death target the Shooter Horde, and they did mass damage to it. They just rolled incredibly well, and the shooters are dead without firing a shot. So the shooters are dead without firing. The Chariots have been wavered now, and they're going to die probably without attacking anything, so it's not going well so far. The Ratkin shooting attacks are inflicting mass damage, which is what I was afraid of. Because if you have a gun line and you roll above average, it can really, really mess up your opponent because they just don't have enough units then, especially with such a low drop amount as I have in this game, only 8 units. So losing one of them and effectively losing this one already means I can only engage a small number of units at any given time now. So it's not looking good. The Siege Breakers are moving up, though, and Grogagamok. So most of them, I think at least those 2 are going to be in charge range next turn. This unit won't be, most likely, depending what he does. And we're on to turn 3. So you can see here that he's actually moved this unit forward, exposing their flank. I don't think these guys were actually in the woods last turn, because presumably he would have charged the Elohi. So they're not quite, but they are now firmly in the woods. And he's put this unit right in front of the Chariots, and then he's moved the shooty attacks up there just so he can try and put some more damage on the Chariots and remove them. So he's threatening the rear of the Elohi there, so they're going to have to fly away next turn. And also the Giant, when he inevitably steams into someone, there's a risk he can get flanked. So he's made the choice to expose that flank, and I thought this was a trap, because the Elohi at the moment, I'm not even sure I want to fight that unit, because if I double charge them with the Giant, there's a chance I'll kill them. I'll probably waver them, but then that means the Elohi are going to get killed in the flank by this unit, and I may want them to be taking objectives at the end of the game. So I was thinking maybe I could just completely fly them away from this combat, because they do have a pivot and a 20-inch move, so I could easily get out of harm's way here. So we shall see whether I decide to go down that route or not. Over on this side, he decides to charge his small unit of rat warriors here into my Siege Breakers, because he thought, well, I can't avoid the charge any longer because even if I move backwards, I'm still within range, so I might as well just sacrifice a unit, try and slow them down a bit and stop them getting the big juicy unit first. And then he's going to unleash his shooting attacks now, of course. Let's see what they do this time. So, the 2 wheels owe death. Well, I'm not sure if the wheels actually did this damage. Maybe they just moved. I think they moved backwards, actually. And over here, some more damage was put onto the chariots, and they became wavered again, which isn't that bad, because I was thinking maybe they were going to die in this turn. So just becoming wavered is kind of a bonus. It's going to tie up at least one of his shooter units for another turn. But look at this. Grogagamok is on 10 damage now. Obscenely good rolling from his shooty wheels and the other projectiles he's got in there from his casters. And, oh dear, 10 damage on him. He didn't become wavered, though. So a low nerve roll saves him a bit there. So he is going to be able to do something during this game before he dies, but he's not going to be able to live much longer. Over here, now this is my turn, because you can see the Elohi had 6 damage on them. That was because they were shot at as well by the units over here that didn't target the chariots. So presumably they were up to 7 damage and then got 1 back for the Iron Resolve. So they charge in the flank of this unit. Now I decided not to run away with the Elohi because they were already on 6 damage. So I thought, is it really worth trying to keep them alive for the rest of the game? Because one sneaky breath weapon or one wizard or one anything pretty much is going to be able to hit them and finish them off. So keeping them alive didn't seem like an option at that point. So I thought I'll just throw them in now, try and get some killing done with them. And in combination with the giant, maybe take out this unit, at least waver it though. But as you can see, only 12 damage, and then I couldn't waver them. Wow, I would have expected to do a bit more damage than that. But it was not to be, unfortunately. So that unit isn't even wavered now. So the giant is going to get hit, and the Elohi are going to get hit in the flank there. So that's not going well at all. Over on this side, the siege breakers who didn't take any damage from the charge of this rat unit, when I went back into him, I did 7 damage, which is a bit disappointing and not enough to kill them. So that was annoying. Over here, though, old Grocky does get into combat with one of the wheels, does 8 damage to it, but he can't actually remove it, which is very disappointing. You expect when he hits something like that, you expect it to drop. Not this time. Turn 4. And you can see the walls are closing in. He's gone for both those obvious charges there. These units are moving in. The one shooting unit has stayed there to block the chariot and to shoot at it from point-blank range. I think that's actually closer than an inch, but it's supposed to be an inch away there, obviously, because it wouldn't have charged the chariot. That would be nuts. And over here, he's just sitting back with his other units. He will have countercharged old Grogagamok there, but the other one will just stay there and shoot. And the chariots get deleted. Wow, so they're dead. Hello to the new people that have popped up in the chat, by the way. In the last few minutes, the likes of Fluffy Dread, Kyle Poole, David A have popped up. So hello to you. Now, so the chariots are gone. Over here, you can see the sun drenching the hall now because there were a lot of windows. And the standard bearer here has become wavered as a result of annoying little shooting attacks. And these siege breakers, the ones that were standing out in the open, have taken 2 damage from shooting, so I'm not worried about them at all at this stage. So, the giant is dead in 1 hit from these guys. I can't remember what they're called, this really elite, hitty Ratkin unit, but they're quite nasty. I think they were defense 5, possibly. Maybe 5, and they've got some crushing strength on them as well, I think. Or it may have been vicious, they have. Can't remember. But they were tasty, and they killed the giant in 1 go by rolling exceptionally well. The Elohi were always going to be killed after being charged in the flank. So this flank has crumbled, big time. Kyle Poole says the shadow shot looks like death coming for your models. Yes, that's a pretty fair assessment, I would say. So this unit of siege breakers kill the little unit they were fighting. This unit gets into this big rat warrior unit here and wavers them. And then old Grokster, you can see he became wavered in combat with that wheel after taking 1 more damage from it. So he should probably be dead with all that damage on him, but he's not. Turn 5. not looking good for me at all, and I can't focus too much on the objectives right now. I've just got to try and kill things because I don't think I have any chance of even getting a draw out of this. I've only got these units left pretty much. So he's just working out his various lightning bolts from those wheels there. Yeah, you can get a closer look at his fingernails there if you want to assess the quality of the cutting there. You can usually tell whether someone's a fingernail cutter or a fingernail biter, can't you? Let's see. It looks fairly smooth. I'll give him the benefit of the doubt there. So, that unit, of course, being wavered, they can't do anything, but that just leaves him open to do lots of shooting. And these things are height 4, so they can see over units if they're willing to shoot through cover, which they probably are. And the rest of his army is marching menacingly towards the standard bearer, who doesn't have much life left. And look at that, he's dead. He just gets shot to bits. And here, these siege breakers take a fair bit of damage from shooting. They're up to 10. And these guys, why is there a picture of them? I don't know. Oh, they must have killed something. Yeah, they must have killed old Grogagamok. Yeah, so he's dead. And these two units here are all I have left now as we go to turn 6. So you can see just staring down the enemy. That was really all I could do because I wasn't facing in a direction suitable for charging anybody. And look at that, they both become wavered from shooting attacks in this turn. Now this one here at the back does have Dwarven Ale, but it's not going to make any difference because even if they succeed with their Dwarven Ale roll, then there's no one that they could charge with a single pivot because of the positioning of this unit in front of them. So that's unfortunate. Had it been the Dwarven Ale unit at the front, that would have been different. So maybe, don't suppose I could have factored that in at the beginning of the game though. And you can see a bit of a wider shot there. So, yeah, because those wheels are just proving very, very devastating. And we do get a turn 7, which means that unit dies. And I'm not too disappointed because the way the scoring works in this tournament is that it's not the difference between kills that gets you more points. It's just how much you kill. So it's 15 points for a win, 10 for a draw, 5 for a loss, and then a maximum of 5 depending how much of the opponent's army you killed. So maybe I'll end up with more points because it goes to turn 7 if I can kill something with this final surviving unit. And I do. I kill off one of the wheels. So I played it safe, went for the one that was already damaged and finished it off. So hopefully that earned me an extra point. And you can see the lay of the land here. The stuff in that corner is dead, so don't worry about that. But you can see that he's sitting comfortably near to some of the objectives. There's one there, and there's one over there. So he doesn't even need to worry about it, really, because I've only got a unit there. And I think there's another objective around here somewhere as well. So he was basically sitting pretty on the objectives, and I didn't really have a chance of accomplishing anything. Because the one I was going for, my primary objective, was all the way over in that corner. So really, I probably should have set up more stuff over there and just gunned for the primary objective rather than gunned for prevention of him getting the primary objective. Because ogres, really, they just like to smash face. I could have smashed through his lines like they eventually did. But if I'd done it over there, of course, I would have been on a better objective and had more of a chance of sneaking something out the game, perhaps. So, yeah, a lesson there with ogres. Play the scenario offensively and not defensively, perhaps. There's one to take away. So the final score from that game in terms of tournament points, let's have a look. I've got it written down here. So my opponent got 19 points, which is one off the maximum, and I got 7 points. So I got 2 points for killing. So I'm not quite at the bottom of the pack at the moment. I'm sure there are people that did even less killing than I did in the first round. However, going into round 2, I will be on one of the bottom tables. So let's see what we've got for round 2, shall we? It's getting very tense. So you can see how much time we had left there, actually, on the old chess clock. So I had 18 minutes, and my opponent only had 2 minutes left, which is what happens when you end up with huge amount of drops compared to your opponent. I knew I was never going to run out of time or even come close in this tournament with only 8 drops, and my bigger list still only has 10 drops in it. But my opponent having lots, and I don't think he'd played for a couple of months as well, so he was taking his sweet time, making sure he wasn't making mistakes. So only 2 minutes left on the clock. Okay, game 2, and this time we are against the Horde. Now, I am not confident facing the Horde at all. And I'll go through what the scenario is in a second. But with my Ogre army here, I am not going to be able to outspeed the Horde because I've only got one fast unit. Even the Chariot and the Giant being speed 7, you would think that's relatively fast, but it's not that fast really. And when I think of Horde, I think, oh, they're going to have the kind of Lycan units that are like werewolves. They're really fast. And the Stampede aren't that fast. But when they do hit you, you are deleted instantly. Anything they hit is just deleted. They have the hitting power that I think a Horde of Chariots should have. So, yeah, and there is a Stampede in this army somewhere. So I'll go through his list in a second. But the scenario is Scavenge. So there are 3 objectives on the table. There's one in the middle, and then we each place one. So he placed one over there, and I placed one down here. And the way you earn the loot tokens in this game is to be controlling one of the objectives, and then at the start of your turn, you can generate a loot token on a unit. You can only get a maximum of 1 per unit, and it slows you down to speed 5, which isn't an issue for me because I've got some speed 5 units anyway, and it takes away things like Nimble. So most of his units would be quite annoyed, actually, if they had to pick up any loot tokens. So he's probably going to hope for doing most of that at the end of the game. And in terms of number of drops, it's pretty even, actually, these 2 armies. I'll count them up when I go through his army in a second. But this big piece of terrain here, we could have played it as a hill, but none of these pieces came off, so we decided to play it as impassable. And it actually started off where it was set up when we got there. It was positioned right up here. So the only thing that could have fit down there would have been my individual characters. They don't have the individual rule, but the Standard Bearer and Grogagamok were the only things that could fit down there. So we thought, does that really make sense? Because I could just put this here and then go down there, collect the tokens, and never come out and not be charged for the whole game. So we thought we'll push it into the table a bit to make sure units can actually fit down there. So it makes sense, because we didn't want to play it as a hill because it's so knobbly. So let's go through the setup and I'll tell you what is in his list here. So on this side, we have some, I think these are both units of Lycans, and these models are very nice. I think he said they were Rackham models, possibly. I think that's right. Of course, making nice use of them here, like I'm doing with my Stormcast Eternals, using them in Kings of War. So 2 units of Lycans. They're basically like werewolves. They have a couple of stats that are slightly worse and a couple of things that are slightly better, like regen, I think. So they're about on a par with werewolves. So I'm worried about them. I'm worried about the Stampede that's right here. That's going to just mince through anything it touches. He's got, I think these are actually Ogre Boomers allied in. And he's got some beasts there. I think they're quite fast. And he's got a couple of flying things. I think all 3 of these are flying, actually. I think 2 of them are Griffins, and 1 of them is something else, which I can't remember, but all flying beasties. So he's got a massive speed advantage on me. And if I let the Stampede charge anything, because the thing with Stampede, you would think a defense 6 unit, like Ogre Siegebreakers, can stand up to anything charging them in the front. And you would be wrong to think that, because the Stampede, they cannot suffer a hindered charge by any means whatsoever, because they have Strider and Pathfinder. So they can just walk and charge wherever they want. Even obstacles don't incur a hindered charge penalty on them. And they have something like Thunderous Charge 3, Crushing Strength 1, something like that. So they would be wounding a Defense 6 unit on 2s if they get the charge in first. See, the only counter to them, really, is to either stay away from them or hit them first, which is going to be difficult for me because I've got a lot of other fast threats I need to counter. So we'll see. The scenario does favour me, I will say, though, because I've got slower units who don't mind picking up the loot tokens earlier in the game. So I'm not too disappointed in that. I think it's a difficult list, but the scenario does balance it out, so I think it's very even, this game. Okay, so I think I told you what everything is in his army. You can see my army here on this side. I've got my Chariots and the Giant starting off in the terrain because I had wanted to put something in this general location, and the Chariots and the Giant won't be concerned about charging through difficult terrain. And then I've got the units that would be bothered by that over here. So the 2 characters and 1 unit of shield breakers there. So I'm not worried too much about being flanked, because it's probably going to happen at some point, but I'm going to try and mitigate it with these guys. Because if these flyers are going to be able to position themselves to where I've got nowhere to move, basically, and I'm still going to get flanked. So I'm just going to hope for the best on that one. Over here, I'm sent some siege breakers over there to go and pick up some loot. Now, this is potentially going to take them out of the game, but if he wants to stop me doing that, he's going to have to send his Lycans in there, and the Lycans are probably not going to win a head-to-head duel with the siege breakers, because he's not going to hit me first, because I've got the Elohi there who are going to kind of absorb the first blow if it has to come to that, or I'm going to get the charge in on them and then march the siege breakers up towards that and pick up a token. But I'm mainly using these defensively, just to protect this unit from taking the first hit. So if he wants to get into that bottleneck there, where he won't be able to do any flanking maneuvers on me, then he's free to try. Otherwise, I'm just going to march in there, pick up the loot, and then try and get back in the game with these guys. And I've put my shooters looking down across the battlefield there, because he's not sending anything down here, because that would be nuts. So I've got a free rein to just shoot across there. And I've got the shooting edge on him. He's only got Ogre Boomers as an allied unit, and they've got very short range. So I don't need to be in any huge rush to race up there, because he won't want to be picking up loot tokens early on in the game because of his high-speed units, and it'll just slow them down. So you can see there's the token on that side. That's the one I'm after, and the 2 nearer to the middle there. So, turn 1. And it looks like I've got turn 1, because you can see some of my units have moved. I can't remember whether he gave me turn 1. I think I might have taken it voluntarily, actually. Usually I don't, but I thought, I've got the shooting edge. I want to get more shooting off before he gets across the table. So I shoot into cover, though. Shoot into one of his flying beasties, put some damage on it, which is it's a start. And I've advanced up here as well. So I'm outside of his charge range of his Lycans, but within my charge range. So if he wants to stay there and eat a charge, then he's free to do so. And then I'll be advancing these siege breakers up as fast as they can go as well. So then next turn, they might be able to charge in there as well. So he's got a dilemma on his hands, because he doesn't want to use both of his Lycan units to try and deal with this flank. He wants the support in the middle, because a lot of his stuff in the center is not that survivable, I would say. Because if you look, flying monsters in a straight up fight, usually they don't defeat something like a big nasty horde with a huge amount of crushing strength. They don't usually have the number of attacks to take it out in one go, especially if they're hitting it in the front. So he's going to have to do some maneuvering. And there you can see confirmation of the damage I did with that shooting attack, only 2. His turn 1, he decides to abandon this flank with the Lycans completely. Probably a good idea. This is a trap people often fall into when they find themselves outmatched, or there's superior speed on the other side of the table. Then sometimes they just kind of throw their arms up and say, well, you know what, I might as well send them in and see what happens. And you end up losing a valuable unit when you could actually just completely ignore what's going on over here and head back into the main battle line and just accept, okay, I'm going to concede this area. I've either been out deployed or out positioned over here. I'm going to let you have that zone. I'm just going to come back, consolidate into the middle, and let's go again. So that's a good move here. There's a mistake some people make not doing that. So a good move. Over on this side, you can see, because he's got the speed edge mostly on my stuff, especially with his flying units, he's positioned them around a little bit at different angles. David A says, I really dislike Elohi, but to each their own. Yes, some people think they're overpowered. I think they don't seem too undercosted for what they do. They are quite expensive, about 195 points. So they're more expensive than, let's say, what would I use in a similar role? Undead Wraiths, something like that, which are slightly worse, obviously, but they're quite a bit cheaper, I think, than Elohi. Okay, so this unit here is going to be heading for that flank momentarily. And over here you can see the way he's set up his battle line here. It's because he knows that my siege breakers aren't going to be able to chase him around here and actually get into the game until maybe turn 5 or 6 if they're lucky. And I am going to want them to stay on that flank because they're going to want to pick up the loot while they're there. Over here, you can see here that he's run those beasts all the way down this flank. And I'm not worried about them charging anything of mine in the flank at all. They don't have many attacks. They don't have crushing strength. So they'll chip away at a unit, but they won't kill anything. Yes, Mickey, it is very tactical. Turn 2. And you can see here how it's looking. This unit is going to be stranded for a while because they're just going to sit there and ultimately pick up the loot token at some point. These Elohi have decided not to just chase around that way, which is something I could have actually done. I could have run them over there and stared into the flank of his army, but I decided I would instead present a threat over here for when he inevitably charges into my lines. Then I'm going to be able to counter and do some flanking potentially. And over here I've positioned these two heroes, so he has to charge one of them instead of the flank of the shield breakers. Because obviously I'd rather they get hit in the front if it's by anything, other than maybe a stampede, which is still deadly hitting them in the front. So I've stayed out of range of his stampede, for the record. I don't want to get too close to that. And over here. Now, the Elohi that I sent over into this spot, it turned out to be quite a foolish move, because before that happened, though, I actually shot that unit of Lycans and put 5 damage on them with the shooters. But he actually has line of sight here with his Lycans to my Elohi, which I didn't spot at the time. I thought it was just nowhere near and there was no chance he could do it because of this bit of rock sticking out there, but that was just bad positioning and not checking properly on my part there. So we determined with the laser sight that he could actually see the corner of the unit and he was able to declare that charge. So whether I pay the price for that, we shall see. It's nowhere near guaranteed that they'll kill that unit in one go. Of course, with them being self-inspiring, it's not an easy task killing them off. And he also sends 2 of his flying beasties into the giant. He's hoping to down it in one go, but that's no easy task with a giant. With their nerve so high, nerve 17, 19, and you really need the 19 because even if you get 17 or 18, wavering a giant in combat doesn't hurt the giant at all because it can still countercharge you. So if you're going to waver a giant, you want it to be from shooting. So there they are. And over here he decides, yeah, I might as well send those beasties into Grogagamok, try and chip away and put some damage on him so that it's easier for someone else next time. And of course, they're not individual, so they do get extra attacks for attacking his flank. And up here, he's positioned himself within range with his Stampede, I think. So he wants my juicy shield breaker, siege breaker unit, because obviously wounding them on 2s when they are a defense 6 unit, not much can do that. So he wants that to happen. And he's positioned this flying creature. I can't remember what this one's called, but the other 2 I think were Griffins. This one's not, though. This is some kind of ridiculously powerful thing. And he's positioned that facing in this direction here, because then if I charge into his Stampede, he can then flank charge me. That's his plan. You can see here that he only actually does 2 damage to the Elohi with the Lycans, so very disappointing for him there. And that's not going to end well for him because he can now be flanked with this unit. So that's not going to work out for him at all. And he only does 2 damage to the giant as well, which is frankly obscenely low. So bad rolling there. 3 damage to Grogagamok though, which is pretty good for that feeble unit. Turn 3. So what do I do first of all? Well, I charge the standard bearer into this unit here. And that's going to stop them being able to charge the flank of my shield breakers. I charge Grogagamok, knowing that he's going to be charged in the flank by that thing, probably. But even so, I'm quite happy with that, because I want to hit the Stampede before it hits me. Because if you take away its thunderous charge, it's nowhere near as dangerous. And maybe, if I'm lucky, I could even waver or kill it, if I roll well with him, because he does have those exploding hits. So he is an absolute combat beast, so you never know, he could kill it. Over here, the Chariot Horde just has enough space to flank charge one of the Griffins there, and the giant countercharges the other one. And the shooters and the Elohi charge into that unit of Lycans that were just stricken, exposed their flank because of their failure to kill the Elohi here. So that mistake on my part to position them there has actually paid off here. It's worked to my benefit because it invited a unit in that ultimately did not succeed in their attack. Over here, you can see that the Siege Breakers have picked up a token, but it's going to be difficult for them to get around here. They're only speed 5 anyway, and they're going to be able to move 10 straight forward at some point, and then they're going to move 5 coming around the corner. So we're looking at turn 6 for them possibly getting into the fight if he doesn't run away. And here you can see the Giant doesn't do much to that one, but the Chariot Horde obliterates that one. So I'll take that. Down here, the Lycans get obliterated as well by the Elohi and the shooters in combat. Because these shooters, even though they have shooting attacks, they're still very proficient in close combat. And over here, it should be pointed out, by the way, I think I used the Blood of the Old King when shooting at the Lycans earlier, which got me 5 damage on them. Over here, you can see Grogagamok does 10 damage to the Stampede, which is slightly less than I was hoping for. And unfortunately, he's not able to waver or remove them. I was hoping for at least a waver, because I think they have quite a big waver and route bracket. It's something, I think it's like 18 to waver, 22 to kill them, something along those lines. It might not be that low, but I was hoping to do a tiny bit more damage and waver them at least, but that didn't happen. I did waver this little unit here, though, even though I only did 1 damage on them with the Standard Bearer, so a nice roll on that one. So you can see how it's looking here. I don't think I've lost anything yet, have I? And he's lost some units, so it's looking quite good for me at this stage, although some of my units are about to be charged. He's got some nice fresh Lycans, he's got Ogre Boomers there, and the Stampede, of course, are ready to hit something. Over here, he decides to go in with the Stampede and this big flying creature into the flank of Grogagamok. He's not confident that just one of those units can do the job, so he sends in them both, because the Stampede, of course, are going to be greatly diminished in their hitting power with all their Thunderous Charge being removed now. Over here, he sends the second Lycan unit into the front of the Chariot Horde. So, I don't know, it's going to be a close one. I would hope that they could survive that one round of attack, but with the Chariot Horde, they're not the most resilient, so I wouldn't bet on them surviving it. Of course, they get this thing in the flank as well, which I think is probably the Lycan Alpha, is it called? It's like the Lycanis for the undead, basically. Same kind of thing. So with him in the flank, and like I was saying with the Chariot, it always gets flanked by something, because it's just got such a huge flank that wherever you're pointing, something is going to have a view of your flank, no matter what. And the Ogre Boomers, let's see what they do. They put 4 damage onto the Giant, or if it was, I think it was already on 2, so they did 2 damage to it. And Grogagamok is dead. So that means the Stampede and this big, hideous, grotesque beastie are facing this way. I very much like the basing on this army. There were some very nice snow-based armies at this tournament. And the Chariot Horde does get killed in one go. Not helped at all by being charged in the flank, as Chariot Hordes tend to do. So some of my units are disappearing now. So we're basically trading units back and forth now. And that's what I was expecting from these two armies, because they've got a lot of killing power, but not a lot of units. So if we take things out in one go, we're just going to be trading blows, basically. And you can see the lay of the land here. It's going to be difficult for me to get to the Stampede up here to stop it getting a charge off, because I don't have anything with the range to do so. Because this Giant, I don't think he can actually get there with a pivot, because this thing's in the way. Turn 4. So they move up there with the token. They're still not getting into the fight anytime soon. And the Giant decides to charge the flank of the Lycans with the shooters in the front. So let's see how that was set up. So you can see that the Giant, we've got the little template out to see that he could just about see this unit's flank, and then he was able to just turn on the spot and charge them. What I would have liked to do was to charge up there at something, but unfortunately that was not feasible because this guy was in the way. Let's go back to a previous image. So that's where he is. I'm not sure, actually. Maybe he's moved. Let's see. Maybe he was slightly further that way a second ago. Possibly, I'm not sure. It looks like he was possibly nudged a little bit there, unintentionally too far over that way. But I don't think it made a huge difference because this was quite a tasty charge opportunity, which I was going to be able to take regardless. So I took the flank there, and they're just going to get minced, hopefully. And the Elohi charge into the Ogre Boomer flank, which is a nice invitation to double your attacks. You can't say no to that. So I don't have anything that can get to the Stampede now, unfortunately. And I decide that the Siege Breakers are going to join the Standard Bearer in attacking these beasties here, because this would be a nice cheap unit for him to go and take a loot token with at the end of the game. So I just want to get them killed, and I can't avoid the charge of the Stampede anyway, even with going backwards. So I decide I just want to get them super dead, and then I'll just turn and take whatever the Stampede is going to throw at me. So Jonathan says, where is the giant from? It is a collectible action figure of Talos from Jason and the Argonauts. I think it's made of vinyl, something like that. And it's kind of rubbery, but not the kind of cheap action figure stuff. It's a proper beefy item. And I will say, if anyone's thinking about buying one to use as a giant, you will have to pin the sword. So you'll have to cut off the sword. I did that with a really fine saw to make sure I didn't take any of it away. I just wanted a very clean cut. And then I stuck a pin through it to make sure it didn't bend. Because even if you fix it with hot water, it will bend back. The material it's made from, the sword, does not stay rigid. So you will definitely want to pin that. And the colour it comes in, it's kind of a dark greenish colour, I think. So you definitely need to paint it. And I think it'd look really good in bronze if you want it to look like the actual beast from the film, Jason and the Argonauts. But of course, I did it in gold to match this army. And here you can see that I managed to kill off those lichens quite easily there with that double charge. Mickey Jennifer says, you suffer a lot of droopage. Yes, this sword would droop. It wouldn't necessarily droop. A droop is more of a downwards curve, I would say. But it does lean inwards if you don't pin it. Over time, it does kind of point this way, and it does have a bend in it, which, of course, no one would like in their sword. So the lichens are dead, those beasties are dead, and I turn to face the pain that's going to come in the form of the Stampede. And in the flank of those Ogre Boomers, I did 5 damage, which is okay. It's a start. I would expect to survive a countercharge from them with the Elohi, hopefully. And here come the Stampede, and this is not going to end well. Wounding a Defense 6 unit on a 2+ is never going to end well for the recipient. And there's that inevitable countercharge. Now, you'll see here, this is one of the reroll tokens because he attacked my giant and he needed 6 to remove it. He sent both of those units in there after it. And he didn't remove it, or he did remove it on the first attempt. And I thought, you know, on average, even if I make him reroll it, it's still going to succeed. But I think it's absolutely pivotal to the game that this giant survives and only becomes wavered. Because if it had survived, I think it would be very, very much in my favor this game. Because I've already got 1 token in the bag. He would have been limited in which tokens he could pick up because he would have still been engaged in fights all over the table at this stage. So I thought, I'll risk it because I think it's so crucial. He could have a bad roll less than 6, and the giant could live. But unfortunately, he managed to roll high enough, and the giant was killed. I thought it was a risk worth taking because I thought it was so crucial. And the fact that the giant is dead, I think, means that it's very much swung in his favor at this stage. You can see I've got 1 token, and if he wants to collect a token, he has to be within 3 inches of one of these at the start of his turn and pick one up. He has to be the only unit within 3 inches, not an enemy unit there. So you have to control it before you pick one up. So with that in mind, my Standard Bearer is running over here towards this token. I think we're on turn 5 here. So with turn 6, I can move within range of it. And then if there's a turn 7, I could then pick up a token with him as well, because he's not an individual. So that's the good thing about my army. No individuals means that every single unit can pick up tokens and score points. Hello, Wraith13. So not many units left per side. We're knocked down to about half of our starting units. And some of them are decently damaged. You can see he put 6 damage onto the Elohi, which is a decent amount, but not enough to get rid of them. They have nerve 14, so he would have needed slightly above average roll to kill them off, and he couldn't do it. You can see the shield breakers do obviously die as a result of the stampede there, as expected. Siege breakers, should I say. I keep calling them shield breakers, but that's a dwarf unit. Hello, skeleton flower, or hello, as he says. This is actually the start of turn 5 now. The last pictures I took were after I'd turned over the dice. So just to confirm, this is turn 5. There was a picture of the turn 5 dice there. So you can see what's going on here. The giant, of course, is dead now. So there's a charge going on. The shooters went into the... I think they had a flank charge on this thing, which is why they went from here to that spot there, because they were able to flank it, the Griffin. And the Elohi have been engaged there again. I was really doing well on the clock at this stage, so I decided to just take pictures during my own turn because I wasn't running out of time. And you can see here that they do actually kill the thing that was there with a good roll. I didn't do too much damage to it, but you can see for the nerve I rolled 11 and it was not inspired, or if it was, I rolled really high twice and it's dead. So the shooters kill off one of his potential scoring units and they're still alive with only 1 damage on them. So he's going to have to deal with them. And I waver his Ogre Boomers as well with the Elohi. So that's going to prevent them from scoring any points because wavered units can't score, or they can't pick up a token. And they're probably going to die as well as a result of being wavered there at some point. And you can see here my siege breakers are just about creeping back into the action. They're on their way slowly, but it's very, very close now. I've got more scoring units alive at this stage than he does because I've got my standard bearer behind this building as well. But of course, the Stampede are going to have their choice of who to kill in a moment. And the Stampede choose to go into the flank of the Elohi and kill them, which they obviously succeeded in, and then they turn to face the shooters who were engaged by this flying creature. So, this is, I think we're on turn 6 now, but there's no picture of the dice. Oh yeah, there we go. So this picture actually comes before, this comes after the turning over of the dice. So I move these guys into position, so they're going to be able to charge if there's a turn 7. This guy is going to be able to charge someone if there's a turn 7, because he can actually, from that position, he can pick up a loot token and then charge the rear of either of these units if he wants to. And if he were to charge into the rear of the Stampede, then that would be, he's got a chance of killing them. But the other move he could do, of course, is just move as fast as he can towards this token so that nobody can pick one up. Because the Stampede, unless I kill them in combat, which I'm not going to do right now because I think that by this stage he's charged me. So he's within 3 inches, just within 3 inches of this token, which means that at the start of this turn he's going to be able to, at the start of his turn 6, he's going to be able to pick up a loot token with that unit. He can't do it with them, or he could only do it with one of them, I should say, because I don't think they will be wavered at the time. I'm not entirely sure, but only one of those could pick up the token anyway, because you can only pick it up with 1 per turn from any particular spot. So that means it's going to be 1 all on tokens at the end of the game. And then if it goes to turn 7, I'll be able to either charge that unit or just run as fast as I can towards that token, get within 3 inches of it, which means that none of these units could pick up a token then. And I would have 2. So he would have to kill one of my token carrying units, which he could do because he's got Ogre Boomers alive. But then again, if we get turn 7, I'll be going first and killing the Ogre Boomers. So we'll see. So we're actually in, yeah, we're on turn 6 here, but you already knew that. So what actually happens is I charged his Stampede because they were positioned there after killing the Elohi, and I was able to waver his Stampede with the shooters. So the picture of the turn dice threw me off there, but this is now turn 6. Some of the pictures that we've already seen are from turn 6, though. So they're wavered now, so they're not going to be able to pick up a token, which is a big deal, which is very, very nice. And it actually, I had to use my reroll to achieve that because it's failed or they were inspired and I had to do an extra roll to get them because it wasn't much of a high roll required. I think I needed about 5 on the dice. That sounds about right. Because let's see, I've got 12 there. I think they're 18, 22. I think. And this unit, it has brutal as well. So yeah, I would have needed that amount. And so on average, I should have got it. So I used my reroll just to get it because I thought it was so crucial to the game that they became wavered. And over here, his Ogre Boomers, who aren't wavered anymore, I think they put 5 damage onto that unit with their shooting attack. So, I mean, they're still going to die because they're going to get charged, no doubt. I don't think I can actually... I'm not sure whether I can charge them this turn. I think I would... No, because this is his turn 6 now. So I would have to charge them if I get a turn 7. So if there's turn 7, they will undoubtedly die. This guy here manages to kill off the Ogre shooters. And you can see they've picked up a token as well because they started off within 3 inches of that. And I didn't have any units there. So that is how the game stands at the end of turn 6 now. So this is the final image for turn 6. I'm not going to tell you if there's a turn 7 yet because I want to add some suspense and drama. So, to give you the lay of the land, my standard bearer, I'll be going first. So the shield breakers are undoubtedly going to charge the Ogre Boomers. They're going to kill them very handily. And these guys are wavered at the moment. So, yeah, they've already had a turn of being wavered though, so they won't be wavered in turn 7, so that will go away. So they will be able to claim that unless I move to within 3 inches of it with him. Now, I could charge them in the rear and get 9 attacks with the standard bearer and potentially kill them or waver them again. But if I fail to waver them again, they could then countercharge him and kill him and steal the token that he picks up there. So to guarantee a win in turn 7, virtually guarantee a win, I would charge them, kill them, steal their token, turn to face this thing, so it would only be charging me in the front. Then just move him to this spot here. So I'm within 3 of that, which would prevent them picking up a token. So I would have 3 tokens in my possession. He would have 0. And his only hope would be to charge this guy into my shield breakers, kill them in one go, and steal both their loot tokens. But then again, you can only have 1 per unit, so I wouldn't be able to steal theirs. Theirs would fall on the floor. So you would steal the one off the shield breakers, and then this guy would still have 1, though. So it would be a draw under those circumstances if he killed the shield breakers in retaliation. If I charge the back of this unit, I could get a huge amount of points for killing them. So that would be seriously tempting if there's a turn 7 here. However, there's the amount of time we have left as well. 9 minutes for me, 17 for him. And look at that. There's the next game, so there is no turn 7. It ends on turn 6. So that means it's a draw. 1 token each. So overall, these guys being out of the game the whole time, it meant they were alive at the end to affect the game, but only had there been a turn 7. There was not, so they didn't actually get to fight anybody. They got the token, which was crucial. And also, I'm thinking that this guy possibly should have run away earlier. Instead of joining in the charge with the shield breakers down here on the beasts, he could have got to that spot a turn earlier and picked up a token, which of course would have meant a win. Obviously, it's hindsight, though, and it's something to think about because you don't think about these guys as being decent token carriers. And I think I measured it out, and I think he definitely had at least 1 charge opportunity after picking up a token, because obviously it would reduce his speed to 5. I'm pretty sure he had a 10-inch charge on either of these, but even if he didn't, then he still would have been able to do that little sneaky strategy and just sit near this one. So it would have been very, very in my favour had it gone into turn 7, and the worst I would have ended up with would have been a draw. And in fact, let me just check something on the scenario here, because can you drop the tokens? I think you can actually destroy them. Yeah, that's if you rout an enemy unit that's carrying the loot in melee, you can choose to destroy the loot. So I would have chosen to destroy that one. I don't think you can drop the one. I'm not sure if you can drop the one you're carrying. You may be able to. But if you can, then what would have been an interesting move to guarantee a win in turn 7 would have been dropping this token, charging them, killing them, stealing their token, moving this guy behind here, so that I've got a unit with a token. No, destroying their token, not picking it up. Forget that. Destroying it. So there's a token out in the open here. And no, I've just recalculated in my brain, and I don't think there was a way I could have absolutely guaranteed a win in turn 7. I was just thinking of ways that would have made that guy have to, because I think he could have just run away and possibly picked that token up if I'd left it there. I think. It's an interesting one. There would have been all kinds of weird shenanigans going on, but it doesn't matter now because it didn't go to turn 7. But if it did, you could see all the crazy, weird options that were open to me. Next game. Now, this scenario is where it's actually getting a bit hot in here, so I'm going to unzip my jacket right now. Try not to get too excited. In fact, I think it's going to come completely off. So for those of you out there that have become too excited at that, feel free to switch on a fan or something just to cool yourselves down a bit. Okay, scenario 3. I have the sheet right here. Now, this is Dominate, but it's Dominate with a twist, because there is a creature in the middle, directly in the center of the table. But before we get to that, actually, I'll just tell you what the score was for that last game. So, with it being a draw, we both had 10 points, and we did a reasonable amount of killing each. So he got 14, I got 13. So about as close to a draw as you can get. It's very rare you would get exactly the same score. So very, very close game, and a very, very good one. So this one, Dominate. This is up to 2,200 points now. So this is where the lists get bigger. You can see I've got extra units here. And the units that get thrown into the mix are an extra regiment of Elohi. So I now have 2. And a unit of Ogre warriors with the Blade of Slashing. And they've also been upgraded. Well, it's not necessarily an upgrade. They've been reduced to Defense 4 and got 2-handed weapons. So they're up to Crushing Strength 2. So, with that, you can see this battle line here, and they reversed the table order, so we ended up in a little side room being on the bottom tables here. The bottom 3 or 4 tables were all in a side room at this point. So, yeah, it was actually nice and cool in there, though. The sun wasn't shining in, so I actually preferred it in there. Not as loud as well, which is good for me, being deaf in one ear. Sometimes it's quite difficult to hear what my opponent's saying in a loud room, so being in a nice little quiet room like this is quite a benefit for someone like me. Okay, so I'll give you the rules for this Troll Spirit in the middle. Troll Spectral Guardian it is. So this is, other than being the regular Dominate scenario, where you want to have the highest unit strength in the middle as possible. So a Horde legions are worth 3, regiments worth 2, troops and monsters and non-individual heroes are worth 1, individuals and war machines are worth 0. Being within 12 inches of the center at the end of the table, you total that up. So, the Troll Spectral Guardian, he has a stat line, so he's only moved 4, he can't move out the double, and he's okay in combat. He's got Crushing Strength 2, 6 attacks, and his nerve is 19. So, he sets up right in the middle, and at the end of your turn, if there is a charge available to him, you must take it and then work out the attacks. So that could end up being your own unit. If he's within range of multiple units, he's counted as individual, by the way. So he could charge off in any direction, and attacks on him won't be multiplied if he charges rear, for example. So he has to charge if he can, but if you've got multiple units, you can pick which one he charges. So, and you do that at the end of your turn. So if you move really close to him, then you will have to charge your own unit with him. There is a benefit to killing him, though, so he's not just all negative. If you kill him in close combat, you gain +1 to your score in the scenario for the combined strength at the end of the game. So it's as if you've got like a permanent troop or monster in there that can't be killed, basically, if you kill him in close combat. So there is a bonus if you take him out, but there's also a bonus to sending him after your opponent to kill them. And of course, that's at the end of your turn, you do all the moves with him. Other than being able to charge, you can only move him 4 inches. So you can move him closer to yourself if you want, or closer to the enemy. So let's go through the army lists here. This is against Varangur, which are very, very nicely painted and based with like LED lighting in their faces. I've played against this army once before, but it wasn't in a tournament. You may have seen the battle report, actually, I did on this. I think it was my goblins against it. So this is the first time I played him in a tournament. And you can see these two units are the Fallen, I think. So these are really, really tough, fast, annoying units. They kick serious butt, and they're only height 1 as well. I think their stats are fairly similar to something like werewolves, but they're only height 1. And he's got some armored knights there. He's got some regular troops over somewhere. He's got these guys, I think they're called Bloodsworn, something like that. They're really good. He's got some kind of scouting unit right there that aren't that great. He's got a Mage's Conclave with LED lighting in it, which is an awesome looking piece that he's got there. I'm sure you'll agree. He's got some little horsey archers there, and he's got another hero on horseback there as well. He's also got some forest chamblers allied in. So, I mean, they do look exactly like terrain here because the actual forest shambling bit of it is disguised in the tree almost. So I'm sure there has been an occasion where he's forgotten that they weren't terrain and forgotten to move them for that purpose. There's the other one. He's got one of them on each flank. We had 55 minutes time on the clock for these longer games. We only had 45 minutes for the first 2 games. Over here, my setup, I've got my Elohi around this building because obviously they can fly around it willy-nilly, and I don't think he's got any flyers. I'll double check in a second. Let's see. I don't think he has. I'm not sure. I believe not, though. So I've got 2 units that are flying, so I'll have a slight speed edge on him for the most part because of that. So I want to use them wisely and not just throw their lives away. Actually, he does have a flyer. I take it back. He's got, where is she? There she is, Horde, who is a really powerful flying individual character. So I'm going to have to use my Elohi to keep her at bay, to stop her doing her shenanigans. Then in the middle, I've got my shooters positioned there. And of course, I forgot that shooting over this field would result in cover for whoever's behind it. So, wow. And I've got my giant in the middle between the 2 units of siege breakers. I'm not too concerned about their flanks here because I've got the speed advantage over on this side. So I'm hopefully not going to have any units steaming into this flank here. And then I've got my warriors over here along with the Chariot Horde and the standard bearer down on this side. Grogagamok is over there in front of the Elohi. And there is the Troll Spectral Guardian, represented by a Moloch miniature. Turn 1. So, I believe I let my opponent go first. He doesn't have any shooting. So, I'm letting him advance up. Because usually I like to let the opponent go first in a scenario where you want to be diving into a particular area, because then going last enables you to either kill units that have just nipped in from hiding into that area, or allows you to just leap in there, particularly with flying units, who can leap in there and score some points at the last second and not be countered. I mean, if it goes to turn 7, then potentially they can. But there's only 50% chance of that happening. And even then, you're still going to go last in turn 7 as well. So it does give you a bit of an advantage, I feel, unless you're against an absolute killer gun line that's just going to completely wipe you off the table if you don't go first. If you let them go first, half your army's dead. So under those circumstances, I wouldn't factor in the positioning shenanigans at the end. So you can see he's moved up. The Forest Chamblers have a Vanguard move as well. So they moved forward before the game even started. And then he's moved some of his Fallen up there, behind them, kind of side on. I think he's just trying to avoid being seen by certain units, like my Elohi, and yeah, because he's pressed up against here, so the Elohi won't be able to land anywhere in there. And Grogagamok won't be able to see them either. So everything else has just come up a bit. His Horse Archers and Mage's Conclave have got shooting attacks. They're going to be able to unleash a bit. And he moves the Troll Spirit forward 4 inches towards me. So that gave me an opportunity. I was thinking, actually, I really like the idea of killing this thing, and I think I can kill it. It's nerve 19, and let's see, its defense is 5, but I've got so much crushing strength, I could kill that thing. and I would get 1 bonus point for the scenario then. So him moving it towards me, I didn't mind at all, because I wanted that thing dead. So you'll see what I do to that end in a moment. So I charge Grogagamok into the Forest Shamblers, because he's kind of obscured from his other units that might want to charge him as well then, because these Fallen can't see him. These ones are right back there. They can't see over the Shamblers to him, so he's safe from other charges, and he can hold them up a little bit and just block up this flank, and the Elohi are just guarding anything that might want to stray too close over here. On this side, actually this is still on the left side, these Elohi go forward really far, halfway across the table, and just stare into his flank. So he's going to have to deal with them, because otherwise they're going to get a flank charge on something of his very, very soon. I've got options left and right. They're, well, not necessarily left and right, but straight ahead and slightly left and slightly right. So he would have to deal with them or take the punishment. I think I would even have a charge on these knights in the flank, which he wouldn't like at all. And the Fallen are in peril as well. So I double charge the giant and the siege breakers into the troll and kill it in one go. So that gives me 1 bonus scenario point there, which is going to give me a slight advantage going forward. And it didn't cost me anything in the long run. The only damage I've taken so far was from shooting from his arrows, which put 2 damage onto that unit. So I'm quite happy with that. Now, after I killed the troll, I could have quite easily turned these units to face sideways, because unbeknownst to me, this Forest Shambler unit actually had a slight view of the flank of this unit here. I didn't even bother checking it, because mentally, in your mind, sometimes you divide the table up into sections and think, well, okay, it's a stare down between this unit and this unit, this unit and this unit, this unit and this unit. And you just don't factor in the fact that their arc of sight actually sees over into this side of the table as well. And it's just like a mental block you sometimes get when playing Kings of War, or any war game for that matter. You think certain units are matched up against each other and that charging anywhere else just isn't an option, so you don't even think about checking it. But he does actually have a flank charge there, which I did not check. And in addition to that, you can see where the troll was killed there. In addition, the giant doesn't turn either. Now, there's nothing on this side that he's worried about charging him. He could have turned and faced to the left, because that unit of the Fallen actually have a flank charge on him as well, which they can see, because Herders and individuals, they can see through her, and even if they couldn't, it's height 4 anyway. So they have a flank charge on the giant as well, which is an absolute nightmare. So that was a terrible move. All I had to do to avoid that was just turn him to face left slightly, and nothing else would have charged him in the flank. I don't think his horse archers would have bothered charging a giant in the flank. That would have been a bit of a suicide mission. So, wow, just needlessly not turning both of those units just by not looking at things that could charge them properly. Because when I was working out the double charge into the troll, I actually measured to make sure that none of my units would be charged by this Fallen unit. I measured to make sure they'd be out of range after the combat, and they were, but not this one. So, wow, indeed. So a bit of a blunder there, giving up 2 needless flank charges, which he is going to take in turn 2. So look, there's the first one. Forest Shamblers in. I'm not pleased by that at all, because they're not going to be hindered by any difficult terrain, because they're trees, so why would they care running through the woods? And of course, this unit is only defense 4 in the side, so they could get eaten there. And over here, the Fallen into the giant's flank, which potentially can get rid of them as well. I can't remember whether this unit can be hindered or not by difficult terrain. I would have to check, but I think they probably can. So it's by no means a guarantee that they'll kill the giant. He does have high nerve as well, but you don't want to get a giant flank charged. And that's the foolish blunder I made. Oh, look at this. We've got quite a nice high definition view of a human arm here with a watch on it. So if anyone wants to analyze the condition of anyone's hand here, let's see. Nothing particularly strange going on there. Looks like a clean fingernail. Okay, we'll let him off with that one. And you can see here the Forest Shamblers have gone back into Grocki. I don't think you can see their damage, but I think they must have taken damage from being charged. You just can't see the dice from this angle. Now he's doing some positioning shenanigans down here, because he wants to try and prevent some of my units from flanking his other units. So he has put his standard bearer in this spot down here, and he actually spends quite a large chunk of his clock working out the best angle for where to put this to prevent flank charges, because the Elohi have a lot of options, of course, and I've got some, I think these are shield breakers down here, or siege breakers, should I say. So he's trying his best to block things up, but I don't think he can do too much because I've got a lot of maneuverability with this unit. So it's in vain in the end, I think. But you can see he's closing in for the kill now. He's moved everything up. And those fallen have moved up behind there. So that he knows the forest shamblers might get killed next time. So he's prepared for the furious follow-up that he can dish out to old Grocky there. And everything else has moved up a bit as well. This unit here, they're kind of a cheap expendable unit. He's just pushed them right into the middle. And I'm not sure who he's aiming at with them, but they're just sitting kind of on their own in the middle facing this way here. So we'll see how that goes. But it's all going to come down to combat. There's the final position he chooses for his standard bearer, I think. So the forest shamblers, oh, actually no, this must be shooting attacks. So 2 more damage go onto these warriors. They might have not taken any already, actually. It might have just been a straight 4 damage they took from the shooting attacks that he's got up there, the horse archers and the mage's conclave. And over here, look at this. The fallen in the flank of the giant only do 7 damage. He is incredibly disappointed with that, and rightly so. I would have thought he would have done more than that. With a giant, though, it's still possible he would have ended up only wavering it, which would have meant it could countercharge him. So it wasn't a guaranteed success by any means, but you would expect him to do more than 7. So he's very, very disappointed there. And you can see there that these guys, these shield breakers, take 8 damage from the forest shamblers, which isn't enough to do anything to them either. So they're going to be free to run off and do their thing as well. So neither of those flank charges, which I needlessly left open, neither of them actually came back to bite me particularly, other than just accumulation of damage over time. I haven't lost any units yet. So that is potentially a big deal. Up here, you can see that Horde actually killed my Elohi unit in one go with a charge. So he had to send her over there to deal with them. So that was kind of their role, because they didn't want her to have a free reign and do what she wants. So I had to give him something to think about with them. So they were hoping to hold her up for a turn longer than that, though. They would expect to last 2 turns against her, but alas, they did not. They were dead. Over here, you can see the forest shamblers over on this side do damage old Grokster, Mr. Grogagamok, quite a bit. You can see the clock there. I'm on 43 minutes, it looks like, and my opponent has 32 minutes. He was taking a while planning out his tactical moves. So you can see a wide shot here of what's going on exactly. And on this side, I've not taken much damage. I've taken damage in the middle and not much on this flank either. So all my damage is focused in the middle. And I think I'm in a position to unleash serious pain now, because he's got 2 units left flapping in the wind, as it were. And they are going to be flank charged or killed some other way. And I've also got open charges for the giant and these guys as well, who could potentially charge off maybe at that unit in the center there. And the Elohi, they have actually got, because they're height 2, they can see a few things here. And they've got actually a charge option open to them, which I'm planning at the moment during his turn. But obviously I'm not going to tell him because I don't want him to block it up. But there is something I think I'm going to take in a second. So let's see, because the warriors were actually right there, and we got the template out and saw that they do have a rear charge on the forest shamblers. So I took that, which goes in there. And that allowed that unit to not even worry about this combat anymore, because that's just going to be an absolute massacre. A rear charge from ogres, never going to be fun. And here, the shooters and the siege breakers double charged the flank of the fallen, which were fighting the giant. So they're not going to last much longer either. They're already on 4 wounds, so they're going to be toast, hopefully, barring a double 1. Grogagamok goes back into those forest shamblers. And these 2 units, the giant and the shield breakers or siege breakers over here, double charge that unit in the center, because they're both damaged. Neither of them want to take another round of shooting from the mage's conclave and the horse archers. So they think we might as well kill something now while we're still alive. And the Elohi, you can see them up here, because the sneaky charge I found was onto these Bloodsworn. They could just I think we got a laser out just to confirm, but they could see to about there. I think they could see a fair portion of the base, so they were able to fly all the way in there and attack this unit. And I thought maybe I could possibly get rid of them with a good roll there. And if not, I've landed right in amongst his lines and prevented this unit from charging any of my other units in the centre next turn. So that can't hurt. Now look at this. 24 damage on that tiny unit. Double 1. Wow, indeed. And of course, I've already used my reroll by this stage. Well, double 1s are going to happen eventually, and they had a lot of excitement and drama. So I'm a big fan of them. And they certainly added something here, because this unit that was just utterly steamrolled picked itself up like a cartoon character after being under a steamroller. They're completely flat. They just walk over to like a bicycle pump and just stick it in their mouth and just pump it up, and suddenly they're inflated again. And they're fine. They're just going to be countercharging or running amok next turn. And over here, the Forest Shamblers are killed by Grogagamok, who is now going to face some kind of charge, but he's going to take any charge in the front, though. He makes sure that his front is facing all the threats now. Over here, you can see that my warriors killed utterly those Forest Shamblers, and my Chariot Horde is slowly moving up into position. So, you can see the lay of the land here as well, because Horde is up in that corner still, so she's going to be able to affect the game. What she can see is anybody's guess, though, because there are certain units that she won't be able to see over. But I think the Fallen are only height 1, so she'll be able to see over them. Moving on to turn 3. Okay, so the Fallen, let's just see where they were. The Fallen and these Knights here, they figure out, because this guy moves out the way, it is possible for both of them to get the double charge in on the Shooter Horde. And if you're going to take out an Ogre unit, double charging them is never a bad idea, because they do have a decent resilience, and especially against one unit of the Fallen, I could see surviving that, but there's no way I would survive that double charge. And if he charged them into the shield breakers, I don't think he would have taken them out. So I can see why he would want to double charge and just make absolutely sure they die. Over here, you can see he's repositioning his units a little bit so that they are not on the hedge. That's going to be important coming up in a minute. So none of those units are touching the obstacle apart from the Mage's Conclave. And you can see in the middle, that unit that miraculously survived have countercharged the Giant. And all his shooting attacks have been directed into mainly into the flank of these siege breakers here, who were just completely screwed up by that double 1 there, because they're stuck facing in that direction now, so they can't face any of the threats, which is really annoying. But whether they would have faced that way anyway, regardless, because there were threats over in that direction, that's anybody's guess. And you can see the old laser there on the table. Very handy. I think I need to get one of those. Maybe I'll get in touch with the company and say, hey, send me a free laser, and I'll make a video on how important they are to wargaming. Because I'm sure people in their thousands would just flock to the online stores and purchase them by the bucket loads if I so much as mentioned them. So I may have just driven sales up just by talking about them right now, actually. And look at this. What is dead? That is the Siegebreaker Horde that was right there. They were killed by mass shooting attacks. So, oh dear, they have been killed. The Bloodsworn and Herde, who came into the flank of the Elohi, their combined attacks, they managed to kill them. Which, again, it's prevented them from charging anyone this turn. Not that they may have been able to anyway, because that unit getting the double 1 were blocked up, but really they should have been dead, so there would have been a charge lane opened up, so blocking them in was probably a decent move there. But the Elohi have sacrificed themselves again. They've tied up Herde for another turn, and you would have expected this one to die in one turn with that combined attack on them. It was the other one that went down too easy. Over here, you can see that these guys kill the Knights, actually. So these went into because the shooters were killed by the combined charge of the Fallen and the Knights. Then these guys, these warriors, went into the flank of the Knights and the siege breakers went into the front. And that was enough to just completely crunch them into oblivion. But then now I am going to have to face the Fallen head-on with one of these units, and they could easily take out these Ogre warriors. They're only defense 4. They've already got 4 damage on them. They could quite feasibly take them down in one go. The Giant kills off the unit that he was fighting, finally, having to spend an extra turn fighting them that he didn't want to do. So at least he's still alive, though, and old Grokster's still alive up there as well. So the Chariot Horde is now in position to charge somebody. And look at this. Grogagamok charges Herde, puts 6 damage on her, and then wavers her, so she's not going to be able to do anything, which is a very big deal, I think. He's also, by doing that, he's not exposed his flank to these Bloodsworn either, because, yeah, they're slightly further back. So had they been a bit closer, maybe they would have had a flank, but it's definitely going to be a front charge there. Turn 4. So, of course, he goes in with the Fallen into the Warriors, and he's probably going to wipe the floor with them. That's my prediction at the time. And he decides, well, I could either be charged by the Chariots or take the opportunity to double charge. And I think, actually, in all these pictures, let's just have a look at a picture of the Giant. I don't think I actually get a full, decent picture of the front of the Giant because it's always moving away from me. So there's lots of pictures of Giant butt. So we don't necessarily capture the Giant in its full glory in these pictures. However, the Chariot Horde / Stardrake, I think from above it actually looks the best. So it's really good for these kind of picture, still image battle reports. I think the highlighting on the scales particularly and the colour transitions on the wings, I think, look very good from this above angle, as it were. So double charge there. I wouldn't expect him to actually kill the Chariot Horde with just a couple of horse archer units, but he wants to get the first hit in, and that's going to greatly diminish the hitting power of the Chariot Horde when it hits back as well. And you can see here that he does have enough room for the charge there. He just can't push them all the way because there's a stone hanging off Herger's base. So it's not a corner-to-corner charge. There is plenty of room for that. So he's going to be attacking Mr. Grocky there with them, and they're quite a decent unit, so they might get rid of him. You never know. Let's see. Now look at that. He shoots at the Giant this turn. He's got it up to 13 damage, and it has a nerve of 17 and 19. So wavering it with shooting would be fine, because then it wouldn't be able to charge anyone. So he would have taken that. So to waver the Giant from 13, you would need a 4. And he only rolls 3. Wow, wow, wow. So that pretty much makes up for the double 1 I had on the unit that was here. That Giant just clinging on and not even wavered, so it's going to be free to charge someone, which is really dangerous for him when you look at the situation that's going on. Let's see if we can get a picture of where the Giant is. There's the Giant. So this situation here, it means that in the combat phase, even if this Fallen kills these warriors, they're going to have to pick their poison. They're going to get charged by something. The Giant's right there, and it's going to be difficult for them to get out of this arc because he's parked this guy here, this standard bearer, in front of them to prevent them from charging into this unit if they go backwards a couple of inches. Because you can see there, that gap is exactly 1 inch. That gap is half an inch. So if they were to go backwards D3 and he rolled 1 inch, then I would be able to charge this guy and overrun him and automatically get into combat with them in the flank. But if he went back 2 inches or 3 inches, which is more likely, then it wouldn't be an auto overrun. I would have to actually roll to do it. If he goes forwards, he would be able to get out of the Giant's charge arc, but I don't think he would be able to get away from them, even with that there, because the shape of the unit, I would be able to do a corkscrew charge and just turn sideways on the spot and just go straight into the flank of this unit, as they are now, or further forward. So he's between a Giant and a hard place, basically, since the Giant didn't even become wavered from the shooting attacks. So we'll see how that turns out and how he positions this unit to avoid that. So over here, you can see them there. We've already seen that. We've already seen the Giant. Okay, they put 7 damage onto the Chariot Horde, but can't waver it, which is nice for me, because I'm going to be able to hit one of them with Chariot Horde, standard bearer into the flank of another, hopefully. And look at that. The Bloodsworn, just a little regiment of them, kill off Grogagamok. He was on 4 damage already, so it's not beyond the realms of possibility that they would kill him, and they did. He's not, I wouldn't describe him as a glass cannon exactly, because he's not like a Chariot Horde where his base is so huge that you're going to be guaranteed multiple flank charges on him wherever he goes. But he is not the toughest at taking a hit back compared to some other characters out there. He can dish out serious pain though, so he's definitely worth the points. Over here you can see that the Fallen do take out the Ogre Warriors as expected, and they try to fall back, because if they fall back they'll prevent it being an auto overrun if I get through the Standard Bearer, and it'll also mean I'll have to overrun and actually kill him successfully first in order to do it, instead of just doing the corkscrew charge and just going straight into their flank and ignoring him. So they're going to fall back, but they only actually roll 1 inch. So that means I still need to get through him with the Siege Breakers, the Standard Bearer, but it would mean I wouldn't even have to roll for the overrun because it would be less than 1 inch from that point. So, oh dear, oh dear. And you can see, I think this is the... Is that them? Yeah, this is the next image. So they did kill that unit. They managed to get into it. And the Giant was also involved as well from this side because he was able to charge them as well. So they had the Giant on one side and the Siege Breakers on the other, who managed to overrun successfully past the Standard Bearer and get into combat there. And then the combined might of those two units just totally minced the Fallen to death. And up here, the Giant is at death's door though, so I would expect him to die next turn to whatever attacks him. Up here, the Chariot Horde takes out one of the Horse Archer units there, and the Standard Bearer in the flank does 3 damage. He's only got 3 attacks, so he damages with all of them, but he can't waver that unit, so they're going to be able to maybe countercharge him or go for the Chariots, try and finish them off, but they can't shoot anyway, so that's good. So he decides he's going to countercharge the Standard Bearer, which is, I'm not sure, I would have thought he maybe would have gone after the Chariot Horde again, because they're a much higher scoring unit. But then maybe he's thinking, I've got the Magus Conclave, in fact, up there to shoot. So maybe he's going to target that at the Chariots. The Bloodsworn kill the Giants. They finish him off. He was at death's door anyway, so they do a few more damage on him and take him out. Here, Herde charges into the shield the Siege Breakers that were involved in that combat. So she does 4 damage to them. I don't think they were wounded yet. So that's not enough to do anything to them, though. And they're going to have a go at her next. She's already on 5, so they'll be hoping to kill her next round. Now, look at this. This is the comedy moment of the day. Chariot Horde in the rear of Horse Archers. 49 damage. Double 1. Wow, indeed. Now, you know I was describing how the last unit was steamrolled. That only took 24 damage and then got up as if nothing had happened. This unit took 49 damage. That is the very definition of not only being steamrolled, but you've also got one of those giant 1-ton weights from the cartoons being dropped on you as well. And then you've been cut into a billion pieces and put into a blender, perhaps, and then you've been made into a nice smoothie. You've been drank by somebody, and I think we should probably stop it there because it's going to get more disgusting as we go on. But then, after all that, you've just stood up as if nothing's happened. So Kings of War and the infamous double 1 system comes back to bite me for the 2nd time in this game. So that unit is now alive, and that is a scoring unit, don't forget. I'm going to have to take another turn to kill that unit if I don't want them to score a point because they're a troop. So they're worth 1 in there. And they're also holding up the Chariot, who now can't move into the center now. The Chariot is slightly outside of the central zone at the moment. So it's stuck and can't get in there at the moment. So that is the ultimate nightmare because it has to be entirely within the center. So if they just stay there even, and the Chariot has to charge them again, then even overrunning D6 isn't going to bring the Chariot Horde into the middle. So that is just the biggest of all spanners that could possibly thrown into the works. And yes, Skeleton Flower, the double 1 is a classic Remington moment. Mr. Remington, of course, is known for rolling a huge amount of 1s. I must have been channeling him somehow at this tournament. And there you go. That's maybe the most comical double 1 I've ever seen in Kings of War. 49 damage. Over here, though, these guys almost make up for it, but they kill Horde in combat because they are absolute monsters, the siege breakers. And you can see the lay of the land here. So I've put down some markers to show where the central area that you need to be inside is. The Chariot, of course, is hanging outside. These guys are not quite in it yet. The Bloodsworn are in there. And the only 2 units that he's got that can score are the Bloodsworn Regiment, which are worth 2 points, and the Horse Archers, which are worth 1. I've already got 1 point from killing the Troll. I'll get 1 for the Standard Bearer being in there. If I can get this Horde in there, that's worth 3. And if I can get this Horde in there, that's worth 3. So I'm in a very strong position still, but it's made more difficult by this shenanigans here. But it's still in my favour at the moment. I've got much more scoring units because the Magus Conclave and this guy, they're both individuals, so they cannot score in this scenario at all. And he's already 1 down because of the troll that I killed. So turn 6. Chariot Horde, dead. I think it was just shot by the Magus Conclave. Gunned down, finished off, dead. And he'd put this guy parked in front of it as well, just in case it survived, so that it had literally no chance of making it into the central scoring area. And over on the other side, he actually charged into the siege breakers as well, but I don't think there's a picture of that. So he charged into them with the Bloodsworn, and they did some damage, but they couldn't remove them. And then I countercharged them in my turn and killed them. And the Standard Bearer actually killed off the Horse Archers. I think the Horse Archers charged him first, but did no damage. And then he charged them and put 1 more damage on them, and then didn't double one them. So they were up to 50 damage by that point, and they were removed. So that's how it looks at the end of turn 6. So now I could have overrun this unit and possibly got them into the middle, but for some reason I didn't think about that at the time, because I thought, well, I'm already winning 2-0 at this stage. So I wasn't really in the mindset of thinking they needed to be in there, because he doesn't have any scoring units inside. I've got 1 for the Standard Bearer. I've got 1 for the Troll that was killed. He's on 0, and he's got nothing to score with. So even if he kills both my units, if we get turn 7, or blocks them both from getting in the centre somehow, then I'm still going to win 1-0 because of the Troll that I killed. So that just didn't come into my mind that I needed to overrun there. So the Standard Bearer is the only unit that's in a scoring position at the moment, because they're individuals. And the number 1 comes up. So that's the end of the game. We do not get turn 7. So I win 2 victory points, 1 for killing the Troll, 1 for the Standard Bearer being in there, and he has 0 because all his scoring units are dead. So I think that was a very, very good game. I think we both really enjoyed that game. It was very close, very entertaining. If his Bloodsworn had killed these guys when he charged them, that would have put a severe cat amongst the pigeons there, because then he would have had a unit that scored 2 points in the middle, and I would have only had 2 points. So the Standard Bearer would have... I'm not sure whether it would have been able to attack them, but we could have been looking at a draw if he'd killed them. So lots of crazy dice rolls, lots of crazy tactical shenanigans. I hope you enjoyed that very in-depth analysis. I think that was the longest description of any game so far, that one. And rightly so, because it was very, very close, very, very entertaining as well. In terms of strategy, obviously I made 2 monumental blunders in the same move by opening up those flank charges needlessly when they were so easy to avoid by just turning and having peripheral vision and looking to see that there were units that could charge them in the flank that just didn't cross my mind at all. But thankfully I didn't pay for that. And then I was able to get lots of flank charges in on his units. Both our armies were very, very killy, much more killy than they were survivable, it's safe to say. Although if you're rolling double 1s as much as I was in that game, and he got the rolling a 3 on the Giant as well, which is pretty much as bad under the circumstances, when you're rolling like that, units do tend to live a little bit longer than they would do otherwise. Let's see, Mickey Jenber, can you just kill stuff, or do you have to make it run away too? I don't understand what you're saying exactly. You can't make things run away in Kings of War. Not like old Warhammer Fantasy where units would turn around and flee. You don't have that in Kings of War. Once a unit is in its position, there are ways you can move enemy units with spells. There's Wind Blast that you can push units along, or you can force them to move into different positions by charging them. in such a way that mean they have to align to you because other things are blocking you from aligning. There's things with individuals sliding around and aligning to you, and when you charge an individual, you still have to align to its center. You can position yourself so that they have to move themselves into different positions by charging you, but it's all shenaniganry, let's call it. But as far as physically moving an enemy unit, the only thing you can really do outside of really weird situations is Wind Blast. Mickey Jennifer, what does the double one do then? Well, it shows you're not a Kings of War enthusiast, are you? Double one is the nerve test to see if you remove them from the game. And if you roll a double one, they just auto pass the test and they are able to just carry on fighting as normal. And yes, it is strange that 49 wounds didn't just wipe them out, because no matter how much damage you do, you still have to do that test to see if they're removed from the game at the end of the phase, at the end of the combat. In the end of shooting, it's at the end of the phase, but in close combat, it's just at the end of each individual combat. So that test, you're testing against how many wounds they've taken and adding that to the number on the dice, and you want to beat their nerve value to get rid of them. And if you just get to the waver value, they just become wavered, and they're limited in what they can do next turn. But if you roll double one, they can just behave as normal, as if nothing happened. Unless, the only downside to being wavered or being double one, though, you're still taking damage in combat. So if you're a shooting unit, you wouldn't then be able to shoot next turn. That's the only thing you wouldn't be able to then do, because you're still disordered. And you would lose things like Thunderous Charge as well, which is only if you charge while basically fresh and you haven't just been hit in close combat. So those things would still apply. Okay, so you can see how much time was left. I had 12 minutes, my opponent had, well, 13 minutes. My opponent had 3 minutes. So there was no turn 7, so if there was, maybe he would have been a little bit short on time, but I think he would have been all right. Most of the time he spent was at the beginning, actually, of the game. Okay, so we're on to game 4. And this game, let's have a look at my... In fact, I'll give you the scores for the third round game. So obviously it was a big juicy win for me. I got a win. We killed tons of each other's units. So it was actually 19-9 to me, which is very, very nice. So we both got +4 points for the amount of stuff that we killed because it was such a bloodbath. And then obviously I got the 10 for the win. Oh no, 15 for the win, should I say. And then he got the 5 for the loss. So 19-9, very tasty. Bumps me back up towards mid-table. And going into round 4, this is the push scenario, again at 2,200 points, so it's the same list again. And I am up against the Horde for the second time today. So it was Ratkin, Horde, Varangur, and now Horde again. So again, I'm concerned about facing the Horde, but less so than I was the first time because I have more speed in my big list than I did in my small list. And I was worried that in such a large point level, there would be 2 stampedes. And there was not. There was only 1 stampede in this army. So that allayed some of my fears, shall we say. So the push scenario, we rolled the D3 and it came up with 3, which means that you position 3 loot tokens somewhere in your deployment zone. You can put them on your units if you want. And then the idea is to get those tokens into the enemy half of the table. If you just hold them at the end, it's worth 1 point. If you hold them in the opponent's half, it's worth 2 points. So it's called push for a reason. You want to push in there with those tokens and hold them in the opponent's half. Now, he had a lot more drops than I had, it's safe to say. I've only got 10. He's got, let's see if I can do a quick count. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12. I can see at least 12 there. So I don't have enough units to cover the whole table. So he's going to be able to position his tokens in a spot I'm not going to be able to bring a lot of force to bear against. So he's going to probably get his tokens onto my half. Any that he doesn't put near my main battle line, because my units aren't fast enough to cover the whole table. My beefy ogre units, they just don't have the speed. So he's going to be able to have a bit of an advantage in the scenario from that perspective. On the other hand, I do have the perfect units for carrying loot tokens because I have the siege breakers. They're only speed 5 to begin with, so they're not slowed down by it. Defense 6 in the front, they're just the perfect march forward and take a hit unit. So they're going to be carrying all my loot. One of them has 2 tokens on it and the other has 1. You can see the little green tokens on the units representing those. And let's go through the armies as well and the deployment. So which side are we starting at here? We're on that side, I think. So he's got the Lycans, Lycan Alpha, some Wolf Beasties, fast weak cav unit. He's got the Stampede there. This army does look really good, by the way. I think this is the army that won Best Appearance. The category wasn't Best Painted, it was Best Appearance this time, which is a subtle difference, but it means that you don't necessarily feel that you have to vote for the army that has the most intricate, detailed paintwork on it. It means you can just vote for the army that has the best overall cohesive look. And this army definitely ticks all those boxes. The basing in particular I thought was very nice. I asked him how he got the particular snow effect on this, and apparently he used crushed glass rather than just snow powder. And as you know, I do have a snow army with my goblins, and I don't think my snow looks quite as good as this, so I wanted some tips, frankly. Further on, he's got just a pretty average horde of some kind of terrible unit, which still looks amazing, and then he's got some flying eagle horde there at the back. Mickey Jennifer says, I didn't win Best Appearance with my luxuriant hair. No, it was Best Army Appearance. They haven't brought in Best Hairstyle or Best Dressed awards yet at tournaments, despite my pleas. I would be really happy if they did bring those awards in, because I think I would actually stand a chance. I wouldn't be surprised if I got a couple of votes for Best Army Appearance in this tournament, though, because I think people were very enamoured by the Giant, particularly, being Jason and the Argonauts fans, and the Dragon as well, I think is very nice. So I wouldn't be surprised if I got a couple of votes. Over on this flank, he's got this thing on a chariot, some kind of hero, which looks amazing as well. He's got some cavalry, or some, I think they're cavalry. He's got the weaker fast cav there. These are kind of heavy cav. Then he's got some kind of rangers here as well. So they've got 2 of his tokens, I think. They used a Vanguard move. Now, we weren't sure whether you put the tokens on a unit before or after Vanguard move. But regardless, they ended up with 2 tokens on them, and he has another one on this unit in the center. So as soon as I saw that, I thought, I don't particularly have to engage over on this side of the table. I could just kind of hold up this slot without using too many points on it, because I don't need those tokens there, because he's left 1 in the center, which is where all my meat is going, right down the center. I'm just going to ram my big wall of armored meat towards him. The 2 units of siege breakers, I think, can break through what he's got in the middle here, and I could take that token off him. If I just march that wall of meat right in there, I could end up with a lot of tokens in his half if all goes well. We shall see. But I've used both my rerolls, and I made the fatal error of talking about rerolls with my opponent before the game, and that reminded him that they exist, because he'd forgotten that he had them all the way through the tournament until now. So now that's fresh in his mind. He's got the reroll of my dice and his dice to play with, and I haven't got any. So that's a little bit of a disadvantage for me using them up earlier on. And I said what I should have done was go round at the tournament all the way through the day to the other tables and reminded everyone to use their rerolls in case I come up against them later on. But I'm not sure that would have been in the best spirit. So this is just a tiny little hunter unit as well that have moved up, obviously trying to bait something out. And you can see my setup. I've got Elohi, Grogagamok, the Giant on this flank. The center is just the wall of armored meat there. 2 units of shield breakers, and their flank is being protected by the warriors on this side with the standard bearer back there. And the Chariot Horde is staying back because he's got quite a few juicy fast units, and I don't want to get hit first. I've been burned too many times by leaving the Chariot out in the open and it eventually not doing much. I've got a plan for it. I want this Chariot Horde to get a crack at his Stampede. That's the unit I'm scared of. They're equal speed, the Stampede and the Chariot Horde. So if I use other units to kind of bait the Stampede in, That's what I want to do. I want to get the Chariot Horde smashing it in the face, because a Chariot Horde could certainly, at minimum, I would hope to waver a Stampede with one big hit in the front like that, as long as I'm not going over an obstacle, because I'm going to be ignoring difficult terrain as well with this thing because of the Caterpillar Potion. So I would hope to at least waver a Stampede and maybe multi-charge it as well. Over here, I've got the shooters behind an obstacle. I've got the Elohi all the way on this flank, because I wanted to put something right at each end, because I didn't want him to just have complete free reign and just put all his tokens on a side that I'd abandoned and just march them all into my half unopposed. So I just had to put a bit of a token gesture, these guys, though, because I don't really want them to fight over here. I just put them there to make him think twice about putting tokens over here, and then I'm going to move them back into the main battle line shortly. I don't want to fight over here, though, because I have too few drops to spread out this thinly. Turn 1. Okay, he goes first. I'm not sure whether I made him go first or whether he chose to. But he doesn't have that much long-range shooting, so I'm not too concerned about him going first. So he doesn't advance too much. These guys here are just sitting behind an obstacle protecting one of his tokens. And the Eagles, who are taller than them, I think they're height 3, they're just sitting there, and they're going to charge anyone that comes into range. Their charge distance is 20. The Stampede have gone into the woods. They don't care at all about any kind of difficult terrain or obstacles. They're just absolutely insanely good. The Lycans are in the woods as well. The entire army, I think, has the ability to ignore difficult terrain. And I think the Stampede is the only one that can ignore obstacles, though. So you can see the Battle of the Chess Clock going on here. He's moved up on this flank. Again, I'm not too concerned dealing with all this lot. The shooting attacks over there don't really worry me, and he's only got 2 tokens there, so I'm hoping I can just keep this lot out of the game mostly and not put too much of my resources into them. We'll see, though. I'm hiding a bit behind the woods, moved into them a little bit, so I don't care if he shoots a giant or Grogagamok through the woods when they're in cover. That wouldn't bother me too much. And okay, so I've got a plan here. So the little unit of the little hunters, or whatever they are, that moved up into this position here, I charged them with my warriors. They are my bait unit for the Stampede. However, I completely forgot that plan, and I wanted to draw them further back so I could get more multi-charges in on them and draw them away from this obstacle. But for some reason, I pivoted the warriors instead. My brain just melted for some reason, and I didn't move backwards after the combat. I ended up just pivoting instead to avoid being flank charged by things. And that was a terrible move, because I wanted to move backwards, get the Stampede really close to me, and then unleash a double charge on it with the Chariots and this unit here. But unfortunately, I may not have space to do that now because of my foolishness of pivoting, which completely ruined my game plan that was strongly in my mind, apart from that 5-second period when I pivoted the unit instead of moving backwards. So there's their final position. And you can see here that these Elohi have run over there to get away from that side because they just don't want to be there. They don't care about it. And they have made a bit of a blunder as well. In most of my games, I completely failed to notice that I'd left flanks open at least once. So let's see how that comes back to bite me. So you can see there that they've moved up into the woods. So turn 2. Okay, look at this. His Lycans, somehow I did not notice that directly up there, the Lycans just had a view on like the corner of this Elohi unit, which I was moving over there. I just didn't think about it at all. It didn't register in my brain as a threat. I just assessed the situation as being safe because of this bit of terrain jutting out here, and I didn't closely enough look at it, which meant they were able to charge them. So again, just completely needless, suicidal positioning of units, leaving flanks exposed by just not looking at the table properly. They are an obstacle, so they will be hindered. So it's not 100% guaranteed that they'll kill it, but they probably will. And you can see his Stampede do take the warrior bait, but you can see the way I'd angled the unit. If I was going to pivot them, if I'd pivoted them slightly differently and made the Stampede face this way a bit, then maybe that could have helped. Of course, they can pivot when they finish, but it would have changed the exact point at which they land in the first place. So yeah, not backing up that unit and pivoting them instead was a big mistake there. But I'm still going to be able to charge the Stampede with my Chariots regardless. So these little wolves have moved up behind the back now that I've abandoned this area with the Elohi and got them potentially killed. Mr. Grok takes a point of damage from some shooting, and the Elohi are dead. So suicidal positioning yet again, and this time there's no rescue. They are dead from the Lycans, who are now sitting on that obstacle. Over here, the warriors get killed, but I was happy to sacrifice them. That's part of the plan for the Stampede. And you can see very nice glowing eyes on that big mammoth there. And it does make sense that a Stampede is made up of all different kinds of different animals, doesn't it? So that's a nice touch. Okay, so the Chariot Horde does go in there, but because of me not positioning my warriors correctly and allowing him to charge them in the position that he did, I wasn't able to get a multi-charge. Because if I charged in the siege breakers as well, then the Chariot Horde would have become hindered on a wall. And if I used my army standard bearer to block the wall so they couldn't slide down to it after charging, then there wasn't enough space for everyone to fit under those circumstances. So just terrible play from me there in the first couple of turns to allow that kind of positioning foolishness to take over my brain somehow. And I've still got a chance of wavering them. I managed to do 12 damage, which isn't a vast amount, but still there's a good chance of wavering them with that, but I don't actually succeed with that waver at all. So terrible. The Chariot is now open to being flank charged by just tons of units all over the place. Bad news. As soon as the Chariot pokes its head out from above the parapet, it gets shot, basically. As soon as you declare that charge, your flanks are open. So you have to be ready to accept it. You have to kill what you want to in one go, or you're doomed. And now I'm doomed. Over here, I charge the standard bearer and the shooters into the Lycans. I probably should have just stood there and shot them, to be honest. Because, really, I was hindered going over this, and when they countercharge me, they won't be hindered anymore. So if I was just shooting them from there, they could charge me while being hindered on the obstacle. So it would have been better all round, I think, for me to just shoot them. But never mind. Over here, you can see that there's a bit of a standoff because, like I said, I'm not that interested in engaging that side. I'm just holding the Giant and Grogagamok and these Elohi in reserve so that if these guys come over into the units I care about, then I'll have something to hit them with, pretty much. This is going to be a bit of a hold-up force for the most part. And the Giant, in fact, all of them are slightly better at relocating than my siege breakers are. Because the Grogagamok and Elohi are both nimble as well, with them being able to fly, and him just being nimble. So they're going to be able to reposition decently as far as my army goes. Turn 3. So, yep, there you go. The Chariot gets triple charged by the Lycan Alpha. The Stampede goes back in after having some of its wounds healed, because this army has 10 heal potential in its list. So on average, you're going to be healing 5 wounds a turn. So he gets a few of those wounds back on the Stampede. And the Giant Eagles swoop in as well into the Chariots, because he's not taking any chances. He just wants to kill that unit dead in one go, because he doesn't want it to have another go at the Stampede. Wisely. Over here is just spreading out still. He's edging slowly towards my side, and this unit that's carrying the loot is just going to slowly edge up there as the game goes on, just to get into my half. And let's see, what is this that's dead? Oh, that's the wounds. That's the Stampede wounds to show that he got 4 back with the healing. Over here, again, my silliness not just shooting those guys and charging them. When they countercharge me, let's just have a small drink a moment so my throat doesn't completely dry up. I think I'm entitled to it after talking for a couple of hours at least now. So they become wavered after all that damage, which is not a bad outcome for me, really, looking at how much damage was done. And look at this. So he actually rolls a double 1 on the Chariot Horde. But because he's still got his reroll in game 4, he was able to have another go and managed to roll 4, which was enough to get rid of it. Because I think the first roll he got, because it was inspired by this guy, so the first roll he got was a success, and then on the re-roll for the inspiring, then it was a double 1. And then the rerolls in this tournament, you were allowed to use them on rerolls. So he used it, cashed it in there, which got him 4, because you can see it was in double 1 town because it was already on 16 damage and its nerve is only 15, 17. So it needed to be another double 1 to save it, and he couldn't do it twice in a row, unfortunately. So the Chariot Horde is dead, but his reroll is gone. So there's one minor plus that comes out of that. But it shows you the difference. If those rerolls aren't in play, if he'd used it in any of his 3 previous games, he would have been in serious trouble now, because that Chariot Horde, I predict, undoubtedly would have finished off the Stampede, and then his Eagles would have been flank charged by these Siege Breakers there as well. So it would have been really bad news for him, actually, if that double 1 had gone through. But as you can see, it's gone. And the Stampede in my next turn, I do manage to waver the Stampede by charging the Standard Bearer into them and putting a bit more damage on them and actually rolling half-decent roll this time and waver them. Tasty. I'll take it. It's held them up because they are a big threat. And it's going to allow me to continue to advance without worrying about them for a bit longer. Because they're wavered, they can't even charge the Standard Bearer next time, so he's going to hold them up for a while. My 2 units of Siege Breakers are just moving towards the opponent's half with the tokens, as is the game plan. And you can see I'm starting to abandon this flank now, because the standoff has gone on long enough, and I need reinforcements over there because the Chariot Horde went down. So you can see the Elohi and Grogagamok are heading in that direction, and the Giant is the only thing really that's just staying there just to threaten that lot. Because he's got some decent speed over there, so if they want to, they can charge him. They have got the speed edge with the cavalry units there. Turn 4. So, you can see this battle's continuing. He moves his wolves up round here, so they've got, I think they're speed 10, so they're going to be able to charge someone, maybe in the rear, unless I deal with them. And was there anything else in that shot of note? Not really. Over here, he does charge the 2 cavalry units into the Giant. And you can see, if it was on a regular-sized Giant base, he probably wouldn't be able to fit them all in there. But because this is 4 times the size, twice the width, then he was able to fit them both into combat there. So that is the downside to taking such a huge model. But I think it was worth it, because the reception that people gave that Giant, I think, was warm enough to warrant the slight downturn in effective ability on the table for its base size. Sometimes the rule of cool has to prevail, and I'm sure some of the people in the chat I know are very good painters, more so than they would claim to be gamers, I think. I'm sure there are a couple of hardcore tournament nuts in there as well, because this is a tournament analysis after all. So, now what's going on here? Oh yeah, that's the healing. So there's the Stampede. Look, they're down to 3 wounds now. So they were on 10, they healed up 7 wounds. So it's almost as if they've not even been scratched anymore. So from almost death to almost full health, that is the power of heal. And I don't feel too terrible when that happens, because when I have my trolls, I do tend to roll quite well with their regen rolls. So I have seen people's faces when suddenly an almost dead unit pops back up to almost full health. Mickey Jenver says she's a power gamer. I don't believe that for a second. Then the Lycans kill off the Shooter Horde. They finished it off this time. And you can see those 2 cavalry units didn't do too much, only 7 damage to the Giant. So it's going to live to fight another day, and it's going to be able to furiously countercharge at least one of them. Okay, so the Giant countercharges these cavalry here, does 3 damage to them, and the Siege Breakers that were there charged into the flank of these wolves and just completely obliterated them easily. While my other Siege Breakers that were further forward charged all the way into his loot-carrying kind of average Horde unit. And I can't even remember the name of it. Oh, can we see it there? It could be that. Is it the Tribal Warriors? Yes, it probably is. Horde. There we go. Look at that. Capturing the army list on camera upside down tells us what the unit is. So I got the charge in there, but only do 8 damage, unfortunately, because they were hindered by the fence. So I was with a bit of luck, if I'd killed them in one go and stolen their token, it would have been really bad news for him then, because I would have been quite far away from all his units. And of course, this is a really beefy, tasty, survivable unit if you hit them in the front. But as it is, I'm going to be stuck there a bit longer. the Stampede, and let's see, the Stampede is going into the Standard Bearer. They're going to kill him because he's only put 1 more damage on them, I think. And then down here, the Elohi flew in to block the Lycan Alpha. Yeah, you can see here, because he had an open charge into the flank of my Siege Breakers if I didn't break the combat up there, because he's got such a long charge distance. So I had to attack him and block them in with the Elohi to stop them dying, because they're a crucial unit carrying my loot counters. So they attacked him, only did 1 damage though, because they were hindered by that gosh darn fence. So you can see a nice wide shot there. And I'm clearly losing on the amount of units that have been killed, because I don't have that much left. But in terms of scenario, it's not looking too bad for me at the moment. It's very, very dicey either way, because I was just going 100% for the scenario, accepting I'm going to lose in a kill fight, basically, and just hold up the flanks and just push that big, meaty wall of meat all the way down the middle, big armored meat block into the enemy, hold up the flanks, and hope that that's enough, even if I end up losing more units than I kill. Just going all out for the scenario win. Turn 5. So, double charge. The Lycans and the Lycan Alpha into the Elohi, as expected. The Stampede into the Standard Bearer. They're going to absolutely eat him for breakfast, probably. And over here, the Wolves have positioned themselves, so they're definitely going to be charging someone in the rear next time. The Cavalry and the Giant commencing their duel. And look at that. The Elohi are dead. The Standard Bearer is dead. So the units there are going to be able to turn around and face my advancing units. The Giant becomes wavered in combat, which is never fun for the opponent because Giants can still countercharge while wavered. Let's see, he was on 14 damage. So it would have taken 5 on the dice to kill him. So he must have rolled lower than 5. So the Giant's actually been quite lucky in this tournament so far. Apart from the Giant being part of the attack that rolled a double 1 on a unit in the last game. And here, Grogagamok helps out against the Tribal Warriors. And yeah, so this unit, I don't think I wavered them last time. So I wasn't hindered anymore. With Grogagamok in there as well, and only managed to get them up to, how much is that? 17 damage. And their nerve is, they're a horde, so it's probably about 22. So I probably needed 5 to get rid of them. It may have been 23-ish, but I've got brutal as well. So I probably needed about, I think I did need 5 on the dice to kill them. And I would have stolen their loot with Grogagamok, and then either advanced away and tried to get away from the range of the Stampede by overrunning, or just turn around and accept my fate that I was going to face the wrath of the Stampede in the face. But unfortunately, I could only roll 3. So my dice rolling pain continues in this tournament there. That is a critical one, because now this unit is going to get charged either in the flank or rear by something, and they're going to immediately die from that. And oh dear, oh dear. And of course, he's still got a token as well, on top of all that. So the dice pain continues. Turn 6. So, yep, Stampede in the flank. They are going to be deleted very, very easily. And that's not going to be fun times for them at all. The Lycans charge my other unit of Siege Breakers in the front, which I'm much more confident about them surviving. I think on average, they should survive that. In the front, at least. Wolves in the rear of the Giant, so they're probably going to finish him off with a lot of attacks there. They only need a couple of wounds just to tip him over the edge, because the Giant did manage to waver this Chariot last turn, so that isn't going to be attacking him. And look at this, the Lycans actually kill the Siege Breakers by rolling really well there. Undamaged Siege Breakers, defense 6 in the front, but they managed to kill them. So well done to them, and they steal the token as well. So it's looking really bad at this stage now. And when you go all in for the scenario like that and kind of accept a kill deficit, then the risky thing is that if one thing goes wrong, it can all crumble around you, because the enemy is left with a lot more support than you have. So, of course, Stampede in the flank was enough to kill off my other Siege Breakers, and they've stolen the 2 tokens. They're up there in the Horde with the Mammoth Rider. So I've got no chance of winning at this stage or even getting a draw. So all I can do is just try and kill a few things, maybe. So yes, Grok, I think he's the only thing I have left at this stage, actually. So he charges the tribal warrior horde, and he kills them. So that got me some more points, hopefully. And look at that, we get turn 7, because there's a roll of a 6 on the dice, with that lovely swirly orange dice. So because there's a turn 7, this actually gives him pause for thought, because there's a really bizarre situation that comes up here. It's possible for me to actually win this game with the situation that he was planning to perpetrate, shall we say. So he had the choice of charging the Stampede, the Lycans, and the Lycans into Grogagamok. He thought twice about that because he thought, wait a minute, I've used my reroll. If I double one Grocky, who's carrying a token, and he survives, he could then countercharge the Stampede and steal both tokens off them if he kills them. And he can do it because of his ridiculous rules. He is insane. If anyone could kill a Stampede in one go, it would be him. If any hero could do it. So he thought, that would leave me on 3 tokens in his half, which would be worth more than the 2 he has in my half at the moment. So he spent a while thinking about the best way to go about this, because he could have potentially lost a game from a situation that seems impossible to lose against only a single model. But that is the fear that Grogagamok puts into people. He is just truly terrifying. So he thought, no, maybe I'll just send the Lycan Alpha into him and run away. So he actually runs away with the Lycans, because they have a token at this point. So they run away into my half, which means he can't lose the game at that stage, because he's got 3 tokens in my half now. But it means the Lycans can't help in the fight. So there's 3 tokens in his half that Grok can potentially claim, because he can't actually get the Stampede out of Grogagamok's charge arc and range, because he's nimble and he is speed 6. So they physically can't get far enough away from him. So he's actually, I wouldn't say overtly panicking, but he knows there's a chance that he could end up getting a draw out of this game against one model. So he actually changes his mind after this picture was taken and sends the Stampede in as well, because he thinks that he's going to be able to charge the Stampede regardless. So I need to make sure that Grogagamok does not see turn 7 and dies, because if he lives, we could potentially be throwing away a win here. So he goes in for the double charge, and obviously he's going to do a massive amount of damage. But his reroll's gone. Can he roll a double 1? And if there wasn't a double 1 mechanic, then you wouldn't have these kind of situations where there's all this drama. But no, Grok does not survive. He does not roll a double 1, and they collect his token as well. So all my units dead, and it doesn't quite pay off. In scenario terms, as you can see, it was pretty much in the balance. It was on a knife edge, not the particularly sharpest knife. Maybe it was on the edge of something like a meat cleaver that's just really big and beefy, that kind of blade. It's maybe on the edge of one of those, because I had lost a lot of units on particularly the left flank, which didn't go well at all with my brain melt episode, where I allowed the flank of the Elohi to be charged and I put the warriors in the wrong place, which prevented me from having an easier chance at killing the Stampede. And then a couple of dice rolls didn't go well, but he had a dice roll on the giant that didn't go well either. So overall in the tournament, I think my dice were very poor, and I think you'd probably agree with me. But also, you add that to the fact that in most of the games, I made at least one horrendous mistake and left a flank exposed that was totally needless. So when you make mistakes like those, you can't expect to win a lot of games. And of course, I ended up with a win, a loss, another loss, and a draw. So the result for that game, let's have a look. I've got it written down here. The total score, he killed everything. So of course he gets 20 points. And I got 2 bonus kill points. The stuff I killed was in the corner there pretty much. So you got things like eagles. You've got, I can't remember what all this stuff was. I think some cavalry are in there, some small cav, and the small hunters. I think that's what I killed. So I got 2 bonus points for that, so I was on 7. So I know I'm going to be not at the bottom of the table because I've got that one big win. So lower mid-table or upper lower table, shall we say. So let's see if there's another picture. Yes, there is. So he's got all those units there. He's got just dozens of tokens left and right. Here's a lot of stuff that survived. Oh, and look at this. Here is the goodie bag from the tournament. There is like a 12 wound marker there. Haribo gold bears, which are actually looking at me right now on the table. I might eat those in a minute. I might have something else first. A drumstick, strawberry and cream flavor. So tasty as well. Some grass tufts, which are, in fact, to give these companies the proper advertising, I'm going to go over and look at the pack to see what the brand of those grass tufts is. So maybe you can still hear me as I walk across the room and have a look at the pack. And okay, there we go. It is Serious Play. Serious Play is the company that provided those grass tufts into the goodie bags. So if you're looking for grass, maybe you should check them out and show your appreciation for them sponsoring tournaments like this. And Custom Meeple as well provided lots of really nice little tokens. There were some other prizes from other companies, but the only one I got, I think everyone got one prize in addition to the goodie bag just for taking part. And the person who finishes last goes up first to pick a prize. So the lower down you finish, the better prize you can actually claim. You don't get a trophy, obviously, which are the most sought after. So for my go at the little prize section, I grabbed these little deployment markers, Kings of War deployment zone little tokens, because they looked interesting, and there's an orange bit in there as well. So that's why I went for that mainly, I'm not going to lie. And the rest of it, tasty looking indeed. You could say the grass tufts are the tastiest looking part, even though they're sharing it with Haribo, gummy bears, and a drumstick. A case could be made. So, in that last game there, mistakes were made, some poor dice rolls, not as many. The most poor dice rolls I got was in game 3 when I actually won, though. So it's weird how that happens. There was a tournament a while ago when I had about 7 double ones in the same game, but I still won. So for some reason, when I'm winning, my dice get worse. It's like the universe is trying to keep me in check. It can't allow me to get too high. If I'm doing too well in a game, Lady Luck just, nope, shakes her head, wags her finger, nope, you're doing too well there, me lad. I'm afraid I'm going to have to bring you crashing back down to earth. But I still managed to win in those games, oddly enough. And yeah, I think the occasions of my opponents rolling really well, game 1 would be the biggest example of that, because, of course, there was things like my shooter Horde being wavered in the first attack of the game and never getting to do anything. And some of his ranged attacks did really well in game 1 as well. So that kind of scuppered me a bit. Let's see. This last game, though, I don't think there was any horrendous dice rolls either side other than nerve rolls, which weren't by any means guaranteed successes. I mean, I would have expected to be able to roll a 5 to kill them before I actually killed them. That was the one that jumps out, and also him on my giant. On his Stampede, it was mainly the fact that I didn't waver them that was the annoying part, but it wasn't a guarantee, though. I just needed to roll averagely. And whenever you need average dice rolls to do anything, it's never that crazy if it doesn't pay off. It's only when it's just completely over the top, like in the game with the, it was game 3 with the horse archers, where I did 49 damage on them and then double one them. That's the kind of situation where you think, you do the classic Krusty the Clown sound effect, which is very bad for your throat, so don't do that too much. If anyone's got any comments or questions, anyone who's watching this currently, let me know now before I wrap this video up. And I'll go through these pictures and sum up my army list thoughts. So, it is not at all an optimal ogre list. Not in the slightest. Having the Elohi in there as allies is one of the good points in the army from a competitive standpoint, because they're a very good unit. Less than 200 points. They inspire themselves, which is the perfect thing for an ally, and they add something that the ogres lack, which is what you want with an ally. So they complement it nicely, because the ogres don't have flyers. They don't have anything that's above speed 7, unless you give it the Brew of Haste. So having a speed 10 unit that flies in there, that inspires itself, can just fly off willy-nilly, and is actually pretty decent as well. It's nerve 14, can't be wavered. So those are a really good choice for allies if your army lacks that kind of thing, and their alignment allows it as well, because ogres are neutral and basileans are good. Mickey Jennifer says, why do you always get to use your big orange dice as the turn counter? Well, I just put the big orange dice down first, and I claim the piece of terrain with it. So if sometimes my opponent will also put down a turn counter as well, and we'll use 2, and then I'll just take a picture of the orange one, so it just appears as though my dice dominates. But sometimes people do have fancy turn counter devices that we use instead. Or sometimes people have an even bigger and more impressive dice, in which case we use that. There was a battle report recently, actually, where I used, I think it was a battle report, where I used an even bigger dice than the orange one because someone just happened to have one. So back to the list. The warrior unit, as you can see here, only defense 4, so I'm not that sold on how good they are. The siege breakers are obviously amazing. They are just great. They can take a hit more so than anything else in the list because of their defense 6 in the front. The N4SA Joa says how many people showed up. I think it was a 22-person tournament, and I finished, I think it was about 16th-ish. I think that's about right. So pretty much where I was expecting to finish with this list, I would say. A giant, of course, you would want it on a smaller base, but other than that, it's usually a good inclusion in an army because its rules are good. It's not the killing machine you would expect, but it's the survivability machine because it's got high nerve, decent defense. It's got a lot of rules as well, special rules, particularly the ability to still countercharge while wavered is a big one. It's got brutal, so virtually everything in the army has brutal other than the Elohi. And Giant has other things as well, like Strider. So it's just a solid all-round choice, the Giant, and I would recommend anyone take a Giant in their list if you can. It's just fun as well, especially if you can find a really nice model like this one to use. Maybe one that doesn't fill up an obscenely huge base, though, because it is a tactical disadvantage most of the time. The Chariot Horde is not a good choice at all. I've got the army list in front of me right here, and I'll tell you why. So it's 265 points. And it hits really hard. It doesn't hit as hard as the Stampede, but the Stampede is more expensive. But the Chariot Horde, it's that as soon as you hit anything, you're guaranteed to be flanked by something almost every time, I would say. And especially in an Ogre army. In other armies, a Chariot Horde might be slightly more feasible because you have more chaff, and you need chaff to block those potential flank charges that you're going to be eating. So something like Goblins, maybe, taking a Chariot Horde there, even though Goblins don't have Chariot models yet, Mantic, then you can use small, cheap units to block up the potential charge routes for enemies taking your flanks. So in other armies, maybe, but Ogres, I would have to add in some Goblins, some of the red Goblins, into the Ogre army. And I don't really want to add any of my regular Goblins because the basing scheme wouldn't be consistent across the whole army then. So anyone who's building an Ogre army from the ground up, red Goblins, adding them in, would be a good idea probably, because you would have some chaff then, especially if you're going to take a Chariot Horde, because you do need it. But other than that, its footprint is just too big. You can't multi-charge with it very often because it's so big. You certainly are never going to be triple charging too many units with it. And it's, like I said, its flank's always open. It's always going to be dipping its base into terrain. So you have to put the Potion of Caterpillar on it to stop it being hindered all the time, which takes away most of its hitting power. So you really don't have a choice about what items to stick on there unless you play somewhere where there is no terrain at all. And even with the Potion of Caterpillar, there's obstacles around. If people stay near obstacles, you're so big, you're going to be dipping your back corner at least into it sometimes. So yeah, it's really, really difficult to handle the chariots. I would say they either need to hit a little bit harder to just guarantee whatever they hit will get deleted, or the points need to come down a tiny bit, perhaps. Making it survivable would be against what they're trying to go for, I think, with chariots, because people have said that they need to be a glass cannon. So if that is what they're going for, I think it needs to be slightly more cannony, in fairness, because at the moment it doesn't guarantee a kill enough to warrant its level of glassness, I would say. If you compare it to something like Soul Reaver Cavalry, it has a similar hitting power to them, almost the same actually, has a slightly more attacks than them, but you're far more likely to be hindered because you're so much bigger. And you also lack the defense 6 that the Soul Reavers have. And I think you have the same nerve as well. So I think it's obviously difficult to compare units across armies like that, but that was just the first thing that came to mind as something that has similar hitting power to them. So that's why I use that. And it's a unit I'm familiar with, obviously, from using it so many times. So I think it needs a little bit because you just don't see them on the table, and there must be a reason for that. Of course, the rule of cool meant I had to bring this because it was just an enormous dragon and it just looks nice. And I spent an awful lot of time painting that, more time than I've spent on any other model in my life, I think it's safe to say. So definitely, I'm glad I took it, even though it doesn't perform that well on the table. I'm glad it was there because I think just showing that you can paint things nicely earns you respect in the community as well. Let's see, what else? Banner of Griffin on the army standard. That did help me out a few times. Because the one thing ogres do lack is nerve, because they don't have too many units with big nerve unless you take maybe the warrior horde. Or it's the warrior legion, actually, it is. The warrior legion is something you can take that has slightly higher nerve. But in general, they have a low amount of nerve per point that you spend. Because they're so hitty, because they just kill things much more easily than other armies, then that's reined in by the fact that their nerve is not that high for the amount of points you're spending. So Banner of the Griffin is good because adding 1 nerve to an ogre unit is much more significant than adding 1 nerve to, let's say, a zombie unit, because it's much more difficult to actually take off that 1 wound from an ogre unit than it is a zombie. So adding 1 is quite a big deal. And so I like that. And you don't need to put anything like the Loot of Insatiable Darkness or anything like that. You don't need Bane Chant on ogres because there's just crushing strength all over the place. Most of the time it's wasted against a lot of armies. Let's see, because I've got crushing strength in my army. There's the warriors, which had crushing 2, the siege breakers, crushing 3, and thunderous 1, just in case they ever need that, which seems obscene that they never need that, really. And against anything that's defense 6, the enemy aren't just going to let you charge them anyway. They're going to hit you first, probably, because they're only speed 5. Shooters, crushing 1 or piercing 2 if they're shooting, so plenty there. And it's more difficult to get Bane Chant onto ranged anyway. Chariots, thunderous 2, crushing strength 1. So yeah, the only occasion you might want something like a Bane Chant would be if you're charging your chariot over a wall or into difficult terrain, you don't have a caterpillar potion or someone's charged you first to help them out. Grogagamok has crushing strength 3. The giant crushing strength 3, so it's just crushing strength all over the place in this army. So I think Banner of the Griffin is a good choice for them. Blood of the Old King I tried out on the shooters this time around because I think I talked about this a little bit earlier, thinking they're only going to get 1 shot off that's of any real value during the game because they can't turn and shoot. So I think it's worth giving them 1 really powerful round of shooting with that rather than having a whole game where they're just not being able to shoot, but they have really good shooting, if you know what I mean. And it's cheaper. The Blood of the Old King's only 15 points. But looking back on it, I'm thinking maybe they could have done with just being elite for the whole game because they did end up in combat quite a lot as well, which would have helped them there also. So something to think about. Dwarven Ale didn't come up too much in this game because my siege breakers didn't become wavered very often. I like to take Dwarven Ale on trolls because they have a big gap between the waver and the route value, so they get wavered quite a lot comparatively. So it's a good one for trolls. I might not take it again on ogres. Blessing of the Gods, that did all right for the siege breakers. It makes them even more killy. They're killy enough as it is. But you're hitting with almost all of your attacks then. And then you're going to be wounding with almost all of them as well, with the just obscene crushing strength they have. So you're going to be doing lots and lots of wounds with them. Let's see, any other upgrades? The Blade of Slashing on the Warriors, that was just to make up the extra 5 points. Nothing else to add on them. Dropping them down to defense 4 to give them the 2-handed weapons. I'm not sure if that is an amazing choice or not. Maybe, but it was just kind of the model constraints that made me do that because I just happened to have these Stormcast Eternals with the big hammers. And that's what I wanted to use them for because I couldn't use them as siege breakers because siege breakers have the big shield rule. So it makes sense that they would carry around enormous shields. So I really had to use those guys as warriors with two-handed weapons, I think. I have got some Dracoth riders, which are exactly the right size to be either a hero on a chariot or a mammoth as well. So the mammoths are actually quite interesting because you can take a projectile weapon on them. So I've used them in the one battle report that you can see on my channel where I used ogres prior to this tournament. I did use mammoths in there, and they did all right. I couldn't justify taking them in this list because I wanted to take the giant for the rule of cool. I wanted to take the chariot horde for the rule of cool, and then to be somewhat not terrible in terms of list building, I wanted to ally in the 2 units of Elohi as well. So the mammoths were the thing that came out of the list to accommodate all that goodness and juiciness. Let's see, anything else to comment on? The point levels for this tournament I thought were interesting. Most tournaments are 2,000 points, so it's always good to have a little bit of a mix-up and see things that you don't normally see on a table. Because there's certain things that don't make sense to take at 2,000 that make a lot more sense at 2,200 or at 1,800. There's certain things you can't afford to fit in that are normally must-haves at that point level. So it encourages people to take different units. And if they don't, if they end up leaving out, let's say, a chaff unit that they would normally take at 2,000 or 2 chaff units, they suddenly find that their army functions in a very different way to how it normally would. So, yeah, I like the point levels being mixed up. The scenarios at this tournament, there's only one that was slightly out of the ordinary with the troll in the middle. And I thought that was a really nice touch, actually. I think it worked really well. I think I spent more time thinking about that troll than my opponent did, because his game 2 finished like way into lunchtime, I think. So he didn't have time to read the scenario pack too much. So we went through it at the start, but he didn't have time to really read and digest it. So had he done so, I think maybe he would have thought that sending the troll towards me might have been a bad idea, because obviously I was able to kill it immediately in close combat and get that 1 bonus point, which put me at a decent advantage all the way through the game then. So I like that. I like just things that throw something into the mix that aren't normally part of the scenarios. I like to see things like that. There were scenarios like that at the recent Dead Zone tournament I was at as well, where they just threw extra things in on top of the regular scenarios, which keeps things interesting, I think. And it's something I'd like to see more at Kings of War tournaments. There are ways you can mix up and make the scenarios unusual without randomness being in there, because adding randomness to Camp 2 scenarios can unbalance them a bit when it comes to tournament play. So adding something in there that has no element of random whatsoever, like, for example, that troll, that you control yourself at the end of your turn. So it's up to you what you do with it. It doesn't randomly charge off in a particular direction and attack whoever's there, which can greatly favor one player. It's not a random weather effect that will greatly benefit one player over another. So I like things in that vein. Okay, let's keep going here as we get back through the images. Mickey Jenber, is glass a good material to make cannons out of? A lot of people seem to do it. Well, yes, you'll fire off 1 shot and then you'll break, probably. But yes, it is an interesting phrase. I wonder if anyone's made a glass cannon in real life that's functional. I'll have to Google that. Maybe you could make, I'm sure you could make like a fiberglass cannon of some kind that was functional in some way. Something to Google, though. Okay, moving our way back through the images. Let's speed this one up because I want to get back to the start, and then I'll wrap this video up. So anyone else who's still watching this live, drop your comment in, because I'm getting very, very hungry, and I'm going to depart very soon and get something to eat. And then I might have those delicious Haribo gold bears as well, which will make the tournament taste slightly sweeter after the bitterness of defeat. Okay, the N4SA Joa says, I'm sure the metaphor is not lost on you, Andy. No, metaphors are very rarely lost on me. You could say I am the king of metaphors. Let's see. Stu, right, they don't work well on sunny days. The lensing effect of the glass causes the gunpowder to explode prematurely. Yes, that would be a terrible idea. I don't think that would work at all. You'd have to be very, very careful with precisely what kind of glass you're using and the temperature outside and the kind of projectile that you want to be fired from it as well. Here we go, almost there. Right back to the Ratkin game. I think for the next tournament, I'm probably going to take goblins again, because I've got some lists I want to try out with them, and I haven't taken them to a tournament for months, because as you saw, I went for undead over the last few months. I mean, there is the triple zombie legion I want to do, but I'm going to use that more in maybe some just friendly games, because I haven't used undead that much in battle reports. It seems to be I used undead at a lot of tournaments, but goblins in a lot of battle reports. So I'll do some undead battle reports with multiple legions for the lols, and then I'll take goblins to some tournaments soon. Okay, there's the last image. So goblins probably next. Some lists I want to try out with tons of drops, lots of annoying little shooting attacks that I want to try out. I definitely won't take ogres to the next tournament, because I think what I need to do when I get round to expanding the Stormcast Eternal Army, when I'm deciding what to add, I will factor in what I can use them as in the Ogre army. And then I'll base it on that. Something that would improve my choices going forward as an Ogre player as well. So I'll keep that in mind. If anyone has any suggestions, anyone who's familiar with the Stormcast Eternal range, or some miniatures that would just fit in nicely with the theme of this army, then feel free to let me know. That'll be one for the permanent comments after the video, so that I can actually look at them. If you decide to drop a link in the comments, I might not see it immediately because it'll be auto-placed in the spam folder until I get around to checking that. So don't worry if I don't reply to that straight away. And I don't think there's any more questions. So I think it's time to wrap this one up, folks. Oh, in fact, one more thing. Quick shout out for my usual battle report opponent, Sam, because he is known as Captain Mid-Table, generally. Because at tournaments, he is well known for finishing. If there's 20 players, he'll end up finishing like 12th. And this time, he got a serious nosebleed with his dwarves and did really well all the way through the tournament and actually finished 3rd and got a little trophy. So well done to him for that. That's the first time he's finished in the podium places. And of course, the only time I finish in podium places, the tournament didn't even have trophies. So, although I'm in no way bitter about that. In fact, the only tournament I've ever won, which was for relics, not Kings of War, but that tournament only had certificates and not trophies. So I've won a tournament for a different game system and got a certificate. I finished 2nd in a Kings of War tournament and got a £10 store voucher. That was at Black Dragon Miniatures, that one. But they didn't have trophies there. And other than that, I don't think I've finished in a high enough position to warrant a prize. At other relics tournaments, actually, I may have finished in the top. I'm sure I finished top 3. I've definitely finished 2nd at some of those. And if I want to eventually win a Kings of War tournament, then I would very much need to not take ogres in their current form, I think, with the army I have available, because I don't think they're that competitive. I think they're a lot of fun to use, and they're quite scary when people get attacked by them, but they don't stand up to that much punishment because they just don't have the nerve across the whole army to deal with sustained attacks, I think. So over to goblins next time. We'll see if they can do better. And I think it's time to bid you farewell. Oh, one more thing, actually. If you're an Age of Sigmar fan at all, don't forget to check out the Andy and Rem show this week on Tuesday night. And I've got a couple of other videos in the works as well that will be coming up fairly soon. There haven't been any over the last week or so, but that's all going to change very soon. I'm getting back into the painting swing as well. I think it is actually July now, isn't it? Yeah, it's the 2nd. So I'm going to do a video on the things I painted over the month. So time to say farewell, folks. Leave any comments you like in the permanent comments section. And don't forget to check out all the links in the description, all the various social media and fundraising shenanigans that goes on down there to support the channel. And I will say, I can't really say good night. It's not late enough, at least here. So good evening out there, whatever you are.